Hey guys, tonight we slip quietly into the shadows of the Nile, where the scent of lotus flowers mingles with the slow decay of something far less romantic. You're standing barefoot on the riverbank, warm silt clinging to your toes, and before Europes, guards, and the murmurs of a growing crowd. It's not a festival, it's judgment. And tonight, you're not just witnessing ancient Egypt's brutal punishments. You're living them. Not in the textbook sense, in the tied-up, sunburned, hope-you-can-swim sort of way. You probably won't survive this, but at least you'll do it in style draped in linen and betrayal. So, before you get comfortable, take a moment to like the video and subscribe, but only if you genuinely enjoy what I do here. And let me know in the comments. Where are you watching from? And what time is it right now? Now, dim the lights. Maybe turn on a fan for that soft background hum. And let's ease into tonight's journey together. You squint into the river's glare as two men in leopard skin sashes pull you forward. Their sandals leave long lines in the dust behind you. Your arms are already rubbed raw from the papyrus rope, coarse and itching where it binds your wrists. The air smells of old fish and something metallic, blood or bronze. It's hard to tell. Nearby, a scribe unrolls a strip of parchment and begins to read your charges. Blasphemy against the gods, desecration of temple bread, speaking falsely of the priesthood. You're barely listening. All you can hear is the slap of water against the stone embankment. You don't even know who accused you. That's the worst part. In a society where religion is statecraft, one wrong word at the wrong table can land you in the hands of a judge who asks questions like, "How well can you swim?" The punishment they've chosen for you is deceptively simple. You're to be judged by the Nile. A common ritual, but don't let that fool you. Its brutality lies in its casualness. The river is sacred, after all. Let it decide if you're guilty. Let it drag you under or deliver you to the other side. If you drown, well, clearly the gods had a reason. If you survive, maybe you were innocent. Or maybe you just have very strong lungs. They lead you to a shallow boat moor, a raft, really half covered in woven reeds. The executioner doesn't say a word. He just nudges you with a staff until you kneel. Your legs are shaking, not from fear, but from the sheer absurdity. This is justice? Letting a crocodile decide your fate? Because, yes, they're out there. You can't see them yet, but you've heard the stories. Crocodiles were once revered as physical vessels of Sobek, the god of fertility, strength, and conveniently punishment. If one tears you apart, it's not murder, it's divine intervention. The priest marks your forehead with a dab of ochre. He mumbles a phrase about ma'at, balance, truth, justice. There's incense, too. It curls into the air and stings your eyes. Then they push the raft away. No oars. No sail, just you, the current, and the unknowable will of the Nile. The crowd watches silently, not out of reverence, but because this is Tuesday and they've seen this before. Your mind spins. How did it come to this? A forgotten loaf of temple bread, taken when no one was looking? An offhand joke about the high priest's bad breath? The Egyptians believed words had power literally. Uttering a falsehood could distort cosmic order, and that meant real consequences. Historians still argue whether these accusations were mostly real or just tools of political vendettas, especially among temple scribes eager to curry favor with senior priests. But right now, with your knees soaked in the bottom of the raft, the only debate that matters is between you and the crocodiles. The current is lazy at first. A few white birds flap overhead. Dragonflies hover over the reeds. You almost forget you're being punished. And then you see it. A dull ripple. A bump in the water's surface about 20 feet away. Something large. Something patient. You freeze, breathing shallow. The raft wobbles. Another bump. Closer. There are tales of condemned men trying to swim, but the priests say the Nile always knows. It punishes the unjust. And the hungry crocodiles don't usually make theological distinctions. But here's the twist. Not everyone was meant to die. In some versions of this ritual, particularly in smaller provinces or frontier garrisons, a person who made it to the far bank might be exiled instead. Humiliated, maybe branded, but not killed. It was a gambland, a form of entertainment. A fringe papyrus scroll found in a provincial archive even mentions local betting around Nile verdicts, though mainstream scholars often dismiss that as exaggeration. Still, you wonder, did people cheer when someone was eaten? Did they boo when someone swam to safety? You brace as the raft bumps against something submerged. It jerks violently. You pitch forward, hands still tied. Splash. You're in the water. The shock is immediate. Cold. Thick. The silt clouds your vision. You kick wildly. Breach. Gasp. But your bindings drag you sideways. You twist, trying to roll onto your back, praying to Thoth, to Osiris, to Sobek, himself whoever might listen. Suddenly, another shape brushes past your leg. Your heart screams. Was that a fin? A snout? No time. You twist and push toward the shore. The crowd is yelling something, but you can't hear over the rushing in your ears. A wave lifts you slightly. You drift closer? You can't tell. One more kick. Another. Then your knees scrape something rough. Mud. Bank. Ground. You're crawling. You're coughing. You're alive. The guards don't clap. They don't bow. One of them sighs and pulls you up by the rope. Exile, he says flatly. Next time, lie better. You're shoved into the dust and told to keep walking. No shoes, no food, just your freedom and the growing suspicion that this won't be the last time you flirt with death in this strange golden land. You limp away from the riverbank, your legs still trembling, throat raw from swallowed Nile water, and your wrists burning from the tight cords. The sun is merciless. There's no shade, no sandals, and the sand beneath your feet is hot enough to cook figs. You barely make it past the outer settlement walls when the guards turn around and vanish back toward the city, their job complete. You're officially exiled, or unofficially dead. It's all the same out here. You wander aimlessly, unsure where you'll end up, but it doesn't take long before you stumble across a different scene entirely, one that makes you wonder if drowning might have been the merciful choice. Ahead, you hear muffled groaning and something that sounds like wet cloth slapping flesh. You edge closer, hiding behind a low stone wall, and peer out. There, in the burning courtyard of what must be a local granary, a man is buried up to his neck in sand. Only his head pokes, out sweat, drenched, sun-scorched, and twitching. A cluster of guards stand nearby, one holding a heavy leather whip, the kind usually reserved for cattle or the worst criminals. Another man, older and dressed in the robes of a grain steward, watches without expression. The condemned has flies crawling across his face. His eyes blink furiously. His mouth hangs open, parched and cracked. Occasionally, a guard pours a ladle of water directly onto the sand, close enough for the man to smell it, never close enough to drink. You've heard of this punishment, but seeing it up close is something else. The Egyptians were masters of symbolism, and nothing says, "You are beneath the earth," like being buried alive, except, of course, they leave the head above ground. That's the genius of it. You can still hear every insult, feel every sting of the whip, and slowly cook from the shoulders up. It was a favored sentence for grain theft, temple fraud, and sometimes blasphemy, especially when there wasn't enough evidence to justify full execution. Just enough suspicion? Bury them. Let the sun decide. Insects come first. Then the dehydration. Eventually, if the punishment drags on long enough, your own sweat and blood attract beetles. One late Ramesside ostracon records a case where a tax collector survived for nearly 2 days, screaming until the end. Historians still argue whether that account was metaphor or simply very graphic justice. One of the guards nearby picks up a jar of honey, and to your disgust, begins slathering it across the man's forehead and cheeks, not out of kindness, but to attract more flies. You turn away, nauseated, but the scent of honey mixed with sweat and fear sticks in your nose. You stumble off before they notice you, the image burned into your mind. As you flee down a winding, rutted path away from the granary, you wonder if there's any corner of Egypt untouched by this kind of horror. But no, even the desert has its rituals. You wander for what feels like hours, delirious with heat, until you reach a clearing where the reeds grow thick. There, in the middle of a half-formed pit lined with mud, 2 workers are digging under supervision, and beside them is a cage. Inside it, bound with rope and muttering under his breath, is another prisoner. But this time, there are no whips, no shouts, just a steady chant from the priests and a sudden splash. A crocodile. Your breath catches. Another punishment? But this feels different. More controlled. More ceremonial. The man in the cage is stripped to a loincloth, marked with red paint. Around the pit, statues of Sobek glisten in the sun, adorned with fresh garlands. One priest lifts a conical jar and pours oil along the edges of the pit. You realize this isn't just justice. This is a sacrifice. Ancient Egyptians revered crocodiles, especially in the Fayum region, where they were sometimes mummified, prayed to, and even dressed in jewelry. But they were also used selectively as punishers. If someone defiled a temple or falsely swore on sacred ground, and a court couldn't agree on guilt, this was the answer. Place them near the sacred beast and let divine judgment be swift. The cage is lowered slowly toward the edge of the water, and the chanting intensifies. The crocodile hovers in the shallows, barely moving. Then, with a ripple, it lunges. The crowd gasps. The man in the cage screams not because he's being eaten, but because the priests have begun to roll the cage. It tips, he tumbles. And the crocodile? It backs away. There's confusion among the crowd. Was the man innocent? Or did Sobek simply not feel hungry? The priests whisper among themselves, eventually declaring that the gods have spoken, and the man will instead be sentenced to labor in a temple quarry. Probably worse, in the long run. You shake your head, amazed at the randomness of it all. Survive drowning? You're exiled. Survive crocodiles. You get to break rocks until your bones snap. Is there no winning? You slip away as the crowd disperses. Your feet ache, your lips are cracked. Somewhere behind you, drums begin to beat a slow, ominous rhythm that means another ritual is about to start. You move faster. But even as you leave the pit behind, you know you'll never forget the sight of that man, lying face first in crocodile muck, thanking the gods for sparing his life, only to be marched off in chains, 1 foot in front of the other. That's all you can manage now. You've seen more cruelty in a single day than most people see in a lifetime. But Egypt's justice system isn't done with you. Somewhere up ahead, a new punishment waits, one that doesn't involve animals or burial, just leather, sweat, and the brutal efficiency of lashings at dawn. You make your way into a settlement just as the sun slips below the horizon and shadows stretch across the mud brick alleys. The sky turns the color of old papyrus, washed with orange and gray. Your stomach growls, but food is nowhere in sight. Instead, what you find is another sound sharp, rhythmic, unmistakable. The crack of a whip. You follow it through narrow corridors until you emerge in an open courtyard behind what looks like an administrative hall. A small crowd has gathered, their faces half hidden under linen scarves. You blend in, keeping low, but your eyes are drawn forward. There, bound to a wooden post in the center of the yard, is a young man no older than yourself. His back is exposed, marked already with angry red lines. 2 guards in linen kilts stand at either side, arms taut, gripping thick leather lashes. Behind them, A scribe stands with a roll of parchment, counting softly under his breath. A third figure, older, robed in white and gold trim, gives a note and the whipping resumes. This isn't chaos, it's procedure. The punishment you're watching is called flagellation, and in ancient Egypt, it was as routine as collecting taxes or writing poetry. It served as a public deterrent and a ritual of purification. That's the part that always catches people off guard. Whipping wasn't just meant to punish, but to purify. The belief was that pain could cleanse a soul that had strayed from ma'at, the divine balance. Even priests sometimes underwent voluntary lashings during festivals to humble themselves. But this boy isn't a priest. Judging by the marks on his arm's faded ink, Broken Cartouche was probably a low-level temple scribe, someone who either forged a name or copied a spell incorrectly. Both were serious infractions. You wince with every blow. The whip snaps like thunder. The crowd barely flinches. They've seen this before. Some of them, perhaps, have even stood where he now stands. You hear a woman whisper, "Better a whipping than the ear." You don't understand at first, but then you remember sometimes this punishment is a mercy. Other times, it escalates. When the final stroke lands, the scribe calls out 20, and the guards step back. The boy collapses forward, and a helper rushes in to coat his back with some kind of paste, maybe honey, maybe fermented beer mash. Either way, it's not for comfort. It's to keep the flies out of the open wounds, so infection won't kill him before repentance sets in. Flagellation had its place in both civil and temple justice. Unlike exile or execution, it left the offender alive, usually, but it also marked them literally. You could tell a lot about a man by the way he walked, or by the stripes on his back. In some cases, a second offense doubled the lash count. Third offense? You'd likely lose something more permanent like your nose. And speaking of noses, as night fully settles and the courtyard empties, you follow the scent of roasting onions to a nearby cook fire. Two older men sit cross-legged beside a low table, chewing slowly. They're missing their ears. Both. Just stubs remain. Their noses, too, have been flattened into odd lumps. At first, you think it's leprosy, but then you realize these are the signs of another Egyptian punishment: mutilation. Unlike the more theatrical rituals, facial mutilation was reserved for repeat criminals, thieves especially. If someone stole grain from the state storehouses or misappropriated temple donations, the sentence wasn't always death. No, something worse. A public disfigurement that followed you for life. Cut off the nose, slice the ears, brand the cheeks with hot irons. That way, anyone passing you in the street would know what you did. One ancient decree, issued during the reign of Ramses III, ordered that all those who lie with false contracts shall be marked upon the face, that their falsehood may be seen by the people. And it wasn't just thieves. Gossipers, too, especially those who spread slander about the royal family, could find themselves tongueless or cheek-branded. Historians still argue whether this branding was done with official state irons or improvised temple tools, but either way, the result was the same: public shame and permanent exile from polite society. You try not to stare, but one of the men catches your eye and chuckles. "What?" he says in a rasping voice. "Better this than the crocodile." You manage a polite nod and slip away. Your path winds past the back of a temple, where chants echo under the moonlight. You pause at a low wall, just in time to see something that nearly makes you reel. A procession moves slowly through the courtyard, priests in dark blue robes carrying a small wooden box. It's ornate, painted with depictions of serpents and lotus flowers. But what's more alarming is the figure beside it. A man, or rather what remains of one, walks barefoot and hunched, clutching something to his chest. As they draw near, you see it, a basket. Inside, coiled tight and hissing faintly, is an Egyptian cobra. This is the punishment of the honored suicide. In some elite circles, when a noble was caught in disgrace, bribery, betrayal, false prophecy, they were offered a chance to redeem themselves by death. But not just any death. A noble death, administered by venom. The theory was that death by cobra was a divine reconciliation, a merging with the gods. Cleopatra would famously choose this centuries later, if the accounts are true. But long before her, the practice was already in place. Select individuals were allowed to clutch the snake to their breast, let it strike, and then be sealed into sacred boxes or buried in temple crypts. A fringe tablet found at Abydos even suggests that some nobles trained specific snakes, believing their venom would preserve the soul rather than destroy it. The man reaches the altar, bows low, and disappears with the priests behind a stone arch. You wonder if he'll survive long enough to scream. You walk on. The wind picks up now, carrying the scent of incense and wet earth. The Nile is never far. Neither is death. And though you survived exile, buried men, and whippings, you realize something chilling. All these punishments exist not just to hurt the body, but to sculpt the soul into submission. Egypt doesn't just kill you, it remakes you. You wake in a heap beside a wall of sun-baked brick, your back aching from the uneven ground and your tongue dry as a husk of old papyrus. Morning has returned to Egypt, and with it, the bleached light of a sky too cloudless to be merciful. You stretch slowly, reminding yourself that you're still alive, still banished, and still walking a fine line between observer and potential victim. Down the street, people are already gathering. There's a low murmur, a hum of nervous anticipation. You know that sound by now. Another punishment is about to unfold, but this one, judging by the somber atmosphere, is no ordinary whipping or exile. You join the trickle of villagers heading toward the plaza at the edge of town, drawn by both curiosity and dread. At the center of the square stands something new, two large wooden boats, lashed together at the rims, forming a hollow chamber between them. Bees buzz around nearby jars of honey, and beside them, bound and unmoving, lies a man. His limbs are raw where the ropes cut. His eyes are wild with exhaustion. Flies swarm around his face. You've heard of this. You prayed you'd never see it. This is severe scaphism, the so-called boats of madness, one of the most prolonged and grotesque forms of ancient punishment. It may have originated elsewhere, but the Egyptians, especially during certain decadent periods, adopted and ritualized it in border regions, where traditional temples had less control and fringe cults took root. According to some scrolls unearthed near Elephantine, this execution was reserved for the worst betrayals, treason against the state, sacrilege against the gods, or violations of the pharaoh's personal decrees. The man is stripped naked and forced into the lower half of the boat, which is then sealed over with the second, leaving only his head, hands, and feet exposed. But the worst part? That's yet to come. The executioners begin their work slowly. First, they pour honey over the man's face, into his eyes, ears, and mouth, then his hands and feet. A priest steps forward and recites an invocation to repel evil from the land. But no one really believes this is about purification. This is theater. A grotesque morality play performed for the benefit of every peasant and pomegranate seller who might otherwise be tempted to steal a goat or falsify a grain tally. Once slathered in honey and left out in the sun, the condemned is fed a thick, soupy gruel, force-fed, actually until his belly bloats. Water is also poured down his throat. The purpose? To keep him alive, to ensure his bodily functions continue, because soon the insects will come. The smell hits you next. It's not even noon, and already there's a sharp stench in the air. Sweet rot, honey, sweat, and something more human. You look away as the first beetles crawl over the man's feet. A fringe account, possibly exaggerated, describes this punishment taking several days, sometimes even over a week, during which the victim remains semi-conscious, delirious, and entirely immobile, while larvae begin to hatch in the waste that pools inside the boats. Historians still argue whether this specific execution method was ever widespread in Egypt. Some claim it was myth, imported from the Persians. Others point to regional governors during chaotic dynasties, particularly the First Intermediate Period, who used scaphism as a power move when the central government weakened. What's not up for debate is the horror, the pain, the humiliation, the utter helplessness. A boy standing next to you tugs his mother's sleeve. "What did he do?" he asks, whispering. The woman doesn't answer. She just shakes her head and turns away. The priests don't linger. Once the boats are fully sealed and the condemned is stewing in his own humanity, the crowd is dismissed. But no one really leaves. You don't either. You sit on a low wall, watching from a distance as the man moans, then screams, then falls silent again. Bees return to him over and over. Ants follow. You imagine the long stretch of hours ahead of hymn days, maybe his body turning into a feast, not just for insects, but for shame itself. Eventually, you pull yourself away. The square empties behind you. Your legs are stiff, your throat hoarse, but your mind keeps circling back to a single question. What did that man do? No sign was posted. No charges were read. Maybe he said the wrong thing to the wrong priest. Maybe he loved someone forbidden. Or maybe he tried to steal a sacred scroll and failed to run fast enough. As you drift further into the outskirts of the city, passing beneath date palms and abandoned shrines, you hear another kind of story, one told by a reed carver sitting by the side of the road. He sees you approach, nods, and mutters, "You know the honey boats? They once used that on a priest's wife." You blink, startled. He chuckles. Not for crime, for scandal. He claims half serious, half drunk, that during the reign of Amenemhat III, a priestess was caught performing rituals in a forbidden dialect, invoking the goddess Taweret for fertility blessings outside the temple walls. It offended the high priest so thoroughly that they deemed her possessed. She was paraded through the streets, then sealed in the boats. The irony? Taweret was also the goddess of protection. But in Egypt, irony rarely saves you. You leave him behind and head toward the Nile again. The wind has picked up slightly, cooling your skin, and in the distance, you think you hear the buzz of more insects. Or maybe it's just your memory trying to unsee what it saw. So far, you've witnessed exile by water, suffocation by sand, judgment by beasts, ritual lashings, and now the boats of living madness. Each one crafted not just to punish, but to make an example, to teach the lesson so painfully that no one who saw it would ever forget. But what happens when the punishment is quiet? When the pain comes not from heat or insects, but from the mind unraveling slowly, all on its own? You're about to find out. The next sentence involves solitude, starvation, and silence, and a raft with no oar. The Nile is quiet again, that deceptive stillness that makes you forget what you've seen. Its waters glide like silk under the morning sun, reflecting papyrus reeds and the occasional ibis darting across the surface. But this time, there's no crowd, no chants, no guards prodding you forward. Just a lonely stretch of bank and a wooden raft flat, crude, and already waiting for you. Your hands are not bound this time. That's the unsettling part. You've not been sentenced in the usual way. No priest read your crimes aloud. No decree was carved into a stone slab. This punishment is quieter, older, and possibly worse. You've heard it called many things, but most know it simply as the silent drift. It begins with forced isolation. No prison, no flogging. Just exile by water, but with a twist. You are placed onto a raft with no sail, no paddle, no food. A single flask of water sits beside you, warm from the sun. You are expected to drift until one of three things happens. The current returns you by some divine miracle. You're devoured by what lives below, or you slowly wither in silence. The punishment was rarely publicized. It was used for crimes too shameful to be spoken, or too political to be judged openly. Illicit lovers of royal blood, temple workers who caught the wrong secret, unwanted heirs, even rogue priests who once whispered the wrong verse during sacred festivals. It was a way to erase someone without the spectacle of execution. You climb onto the raft. It creaks under your weight. The silt beneath your feet gives one final squelch. Then you push off, and the current takes you. No fanfare, no audience, just the groan of wood and the rustle of reeds. The river smells of wet earth and sun-warmed algae. The wind tickles your neck. Insects buzz lazily around your ears, and for a moment you think maybe this won't be so bad. But then comes the hunger, and the heat, and the unbroken quiet. Time blurs. You drift past fishermen who avert their eyes, past narrow inlets where crocodiles watch but don't move. One day, maybe two, you can't be sure. You sip the water sparingly, each drop hotter than the last. Your thoughts begin to drift as well. Strange things surface. Childhood memories. That song your mother hummed while making bread. The taste of pomegranate. The texture of sand between your toes before you were ever punished. On the third day at least, you think it's the third you pass a shrine half swallowed by the river. Its columns are chipped, paint faded. A statue of Thoth, god of wisdom, stands cracked at the knees. Birds nest in his lap. You think about calling out. But who would hear? This punishment, this isolationist, more than death by drifting. It's death by thinking. It makes you question everything. Were you guilty? Was it all a mistake? Or was it merely convenient to erase you? A scroll found in the Karnak archives describes a scribe named Pen Merhet, accused of secretly copying royal dreams onto papyrus and selling them to passing traders. His sentence? A raft, 1 day's water, and no return. The scribe who recorded the case wrote a curious footnote. Let him dwell with the reeds and speak only to the stars. Historians still argue whether this was poetic flourish or an actual code for drowning by drift. The distinction hardly matters once you're out here. Your lips begin to crack. The sun blisters your shoulders. You lie flat, staring at the cloudless sky, thinking you might die not from thirst, but from sheer boredom. And that might have been the point. After all, the Egyptians believed in cosmic order ma'atand. Nothing disrupted order like messy execution. But sending someone off into the current? That left the bloodlines clean, the records tidy. The Nile, as always, took the blame. As night falls again, you hear something. A splash. Then another. You rise weakly, heart pounding, thinking perhaps you've drifted too far south, toward hippo territory. But no, it's a boat, a real one. Long, elegant, carved with lotus blooms, a barge. And aboard it 3 robed figures and a pair of oarsmen. They draw near. No words are exchanged. One of the figures, a woman by her shape, raises her hand. The oarsmen steer alongside you. A hook is tossed. Your raft jerks. A plank drops, forming a bridge. Still no one speaks. But you stand, you walk. Because anything is better than floating alone another day. On board, they offer no food, but they gesture to a corner where you may sit. As the barge turns back upstream, you realize what this is. Rescue. But not the kind given freely. You've been spared. Yes, but now you belong to someone. And so begins the next stage of your punishment. Servitude under silence. You will not speak unless spoken to. You will work, carry water, clean garments, grind pigments for temple wall sand, never ask why you were spared. In some ways, it's worse than the raft. At least on the river, your thoughts were your own. In an ancient papyrus now housed in a museum vault, there is a scribbled list of temple servants who were redeemed from the current. Their names are crossed out, their duties listed, their lives erased. Yours, perhaps, is about to join them. But even silence has limits. And punishment, in Egypt, often circles back to the beginning. You may think your suffering is over, that the worst has passed. But tomorrow, at dawn, you'll witness a spectacle unlike anything yet. One that blends cruelty with beauty, reverence with terror, public humiliation, masked in ceremony and honey. And flies. Always the flies. You rise before the sun. Not because someone shakes you awake, but because the temple courtyard never really sleeps. Somewhere, sandals slap against flagstones. Somewhere else, a censer clangs. The air is thick with incense and stale sweat. You've barely had time to piece yourself back together from your river exile, but your new role as silent servant won't allow for recovery. You carry a ceramic jug, slightly cracked, down a hallway etched with hymns to Ra. You're not even sure what time it is that the birds haven't started singing, and already the guards are moving. By the time the sky begins to pinken, the courtyard is buzzing. Not with conversation. No, today is a ritual day, and the only voices belong to priests and chanting children. You spot the source of the gathering almost immediately. A man, naked from the waist up, is being painted with thick strokes of golden ochre. His hands are bound behind him. His head is shaved. And beside him stands a clay jar labeled, in delicate hieroglyphs, Hift excrement. You blink. You've heard of this. The dung and honey sentence. It's not the most violent punishment, nor the deadliest. But it is, undeniably, one of the most humiliating, reserved for liars, oath-breakers, slanderers, and, perhaps most pointedly, failed officials. When a man who promised grain delivers famine, or a priest who invoked a false god causes panic, this is their fate. To be coated in dung, then smeared with honey, and left to the mercy of the flies. The crowd doesn't jeer. That's the chilling part. They watch in silence, faces composed, as if this is just another offering to a god, no more shocking than incense or wine. The guards work carefully, almost artistically, applying layers of donkey dung over the man's chest and limbs. Then comes the honey thick, glistening, and deliberately drizzled over the filth. Flies arrive before they even finish. Hundreds of them, maybe thousands. He is not tied to a post number. That would be too dignified. Instead, they walk him slowly around the temple perimeter, barefoot, in silence. The dung and honey drip as he goes. Children follow at a distance, whispering. Women cover their mouths, but no one interferes. He stumbles once. No one helps. A priest walks just behind, ringing a small bell. The logic, such as it is, lies in Egypt's belief in visible justice. Punishment wasn't just for the guilty, it was for everyone else to witness and remember. The honey and dung were chosen not only for their contrast sweetness and filth, but for their practicality. Dung drew flies. Honey made them stay, and the stench ensured no one could ignore what was happening. You do not forget the man who walked the sacred walls swarming with insects, not for a long, long time. One fringe scholar proposed that this ritual may have deeper roots, possibly a corrupted form of ancient fertility rites, where offerings of dung and honey symbolized life's extremes, growth and decay. But that theory is laughed off by most. More likely, it was just efficient humiliation, stripping a man not of his life, but of his dignity. The man finally collapses at the western gate. The guards say nothing. They leave him there, the flies still clinging, the honey already crusting in the heat. He won't die from it, probably. But he won't be invited to any banquets either. His face will never again be welcome near sacred offerings. His name, once recorded in temple ledgers, will now be spoken only with contempt. A fly-covered ghost who walks the edges of society. You pass him quietly on your next errand. His eyes meet yours, just for a second. There's no anger, no plea, just emptiness, as if something inside him has already withered, blown away like dust across the sand. Later that afternoon, you're sent to the storage chambers, where grain is counted and complaints are whispered. There, two old scribes argue over the logistics of transporting wheat from Thebes. One casually mentions that in the Old Kingdom, they used to punish officials who miscounted grain by making them eat itraw, unboiled, for weeks. Another laughs and says, "At least they didn't make you wear it." You think of the man outside, still covered in drying filth, and say nothing. Punishment, it seems, was not just a consequence in Egypt. It was a performance, a memory planted in public view, meant to germinate in the minds of everyone who saw it. The Nile washed away many thingsins, names, even entire villages, but humiliation stuck like honey on skin. That night, you return to your quarters and lie awake. You can still hear the flies. Or maybe it's just your imagination. Either way, you know you'll never forget what you saw. And you haven't even seen the worst of it yet, because next comes the punishment. No one survives. The one that starts not with whips or shouts or dung, but with a polite escort into the desert. And no one ever returns. The desert doesn't begin all at once. It creeps. First, the trees thin out, then the buildings, then the sound. One step at a time, the world becomes dust and silence and heat. You're walking alongside a procession of 3 men, 2 guards, and a condemned criminal. He isn't bound. He doesn't fight. He simply walks with his shoulders slumped forward, like someone carrying a heavy pot that's long since cracked. You weren't meant to witness this. You're just delivering a jug of water to the outer shrine. But when you saw them leaving, you followed quietly, just far enough behind to remain unnoticed. You want to know what happens when Egypt doesn't even bother with ritual. They walk until even the temple roof disappears behind a ridge. Then the guards stop. The man stops. There are no drums, no priest, no farewell scroll, just a flat patch of wind-blown sand and 3 deep holes already dug. One of the guards gestures. The condemned man nods and steps forward. This is desert banishment, a punishment the Egyptians used when they didn't want blood on their hands but wanted someone gone, permanently. No trial, no public show, just disappearance by sand. It was often reserved for political dissidents, informants, or servants who knew too much. And according to a handful of inscriptions, even failed royal concubines. The man kneels. One of the guards tosses a small water skin in front of him, half full. Then a bit of stale bread. Nothing else. No shade, no tools, no goodbyes. The guards turn and begin walking back. You duck behind a boulder, heart pounding. You want to call out. You don't. You just watch as the man remains there, staring at the water as if unsure whether it's a gift or a curse. Because the desert offers no shelter, no forgiveness, and definitely no witnesses. Historians still argue whether desert banishment was symbolic or literal. Some say the banishments were just metaphors for social exile. But then you read fragments like the decree of Userhat under Thutmose III, where he sentenced 3 scribes to be cast into the dunes until the vultures speak their names. You don't need a metaphor for that. The man doesn't drink. He doesn't eat. He simply starts walking away from the water into the rising sun. You can't follow, not unless you want to join him. You return to the outer shrine, shaken, dusty, and suddenly grateful for the menial silence of temple servitude. But not for long, because the next day, they come for you. Not with a whip, not with rope, just a flat summons etched in ochre ink, delivered by a boy no older than 10. You're to report to the priests of Hathor for ritual duty. You're not told what that means, but when you arrive, you see the poles. 4 of them, thick and dark from old blood, planted upright in the temple courtyard. Between them hangs a simple yoke wooden crossbeams, designed to spread a body's limbs in an agonizing pose. You're not the victim this time. You're the assistant. You're to help restrain the condemned. You hesitate. A priest raises an eyebrow. You obey. The man brought forward this time is middle-aged, well-fed, and sweating profusely. A former tax collector, someone whispers, accused of skimming from temple tributes. No one seems surprised. He begs. The priests ignore him. This is the impalement by sacred poles, a punishment both theatrical and excruciating. Contrary to modern assumptions, impalement in Egypt wasn't always vertical or fatal not immediately. More often, it resembled a ritualized binding, a suspension of the body in a humiliating posture. The poles weren't necessarily meant to pierce but to stretch, to expose, to display, and, in some extreme cases, to slowly dislocate. You help lift the man's left arm. Another servant takes the right. Guards secure his wrists, ankles, even his forehead. A priest steps forward with a slender reed and traces protective hieroglyphs across the man's chest. You expect the punishment to begin with a blow. But no, it begins with a question. Where did you hide the silver? The man screams. He says he doesn't know. So they begin, not with blades, but with time. They leave him hanging under the sun, skin pulled taut, flies gathering. Every few hours, a priest returns to ask again. No answer? Another hour in the heat. Eventually, he stops speaking. Some victims were left for days. Others confessed within hours. Some simply died of thirst. You don't know what happened to this one. You only know that when you return the next morning, the poles are clean again. Fresh rope, fresh prayers. Egypt was many things-wise, rich, beautiful, but merciful? Rarely. It preferred its punishments slow, its justice symbolic, and its warnings impossible to ignore. Even their gods punished through ritual, not rage. That night, you can't sleep. Not because of the heat, but because of a sound. Soft, distant, almost imagined. The fluttering wings of vultures. You think of the man in the desert, the one with half a water skin and no direction, and you wonder if the vultures are speaking his name tonight. The next morning, you're summoned again this time to the lower vaults beneath the temple. The air there is cooler, but close, heavy with the smell of old incense, wet limestone, and something sharper copper, perhaps. The corridors narrow as you descend, and torches sputter in shallow niches. At the bottom waits a different kind of silence, not the silence of prayer or of drifting on the Nile, but the suffocating hush of stone walls designed not to echo. You're here to witness a punishment that isn't just about pain. It's about memory, legacy, making sure the offense and the offender never forgotten. The priest leading you says little. He gestures to a doorway ahead, where a single torch flickers over an iron chain. A man is shackled, their arms overhead, feet barely touching the ground, his eyes bloodshot and dull. He's been here for hours, maybe days. You're told this is a spy, a messenger intercepted on his way toward the Nubian border. What he carried, no one knows. What matters is that he carried it without royal permission. Spying, in Egypt, was not treated like a secret craft. It was a defilement of truth, a direct insult to Ma'at, and the penalty was designed accordingly. Scalping, not for death, not even for torture, for display. The priest brings out a flint blade, not bronze, not gold, flint crude and symbolic. It connects to Egypt's oldest traditions, to pre-dynastic rites where hair was sacred and its removal a desecration of both body and soul. The man moans as the priest makes the first incision, and you look away. You have to. You weren't ready for this, no matter how much you've seen. The hair is removed in patches, not smoothly. Blood streaks down the sides of his head, and the skin beneath is raw, exposed. There's no precision, just symbolism. Once his scalp is bare, the priest lifts a clay tablet and presses it against the wound. It's a record of his offense, pressed in reed-cut hieroglyphs. When he's released, if he's released, it will be clear to all who see him. This is a man who betrayed Egypt. He will never wear a headdress again, never serve in any temple, never be touched by another without pause. You later learn that some towns kept these marked men alive deliberately, turning them into walking billboards of treachery. A few were sent to work in fields where travelers passed often. One record from the reign of Akhenaten mentions a man marked this way who lived 12 years as a public lesson. Not killed, just seen. Historians debate whether these punishments were ever standardized or simply local inventions. Some suggest that scalping came and went with specific dynasties, especially under kings who feared foreign influence. Others argue it was a regional practice along border provinces, designed to scare off spies from Kush, Canaan, or the Sea Peoples. Regardless of its origins, its effect was chilling. The sight of a bleeding scalp in the noonday sun was enough to keep most messengers very careful. You return to the upper courtyard just as the sun crests the horizon, casting long shadows across the temple columns. You'd think the world above would feel less cruel, but there's a new crowd gathering, smaller this time, quieter. Another sentence is about to unfold. At the center of the courtyard is a stone platform, waist-high, with a raised slab upon it. A man lies flat on his back, unmoving. He's not bound, but the way his limbs lie loose, helpless, makes it clear he won't be leaving. 2 heavy stone blocks sit nearby, each roughly the size of a small stool. A priest steps forward and lifts the first one. This is the crushing punishment, 1 block at a time. The man is accused of theft, not from a neighbor, from a tomb. A serious crime, not just because it's theft, but because it disturbs the peace of the dead. In a culture obsessed with the afterlife, robbing a tomb is more than robbery. It's cosmic desecration. It unbalances Ma'at. The punishment, accordingly, is slow and deliberate. The first stone is placed on the man's chest. He gasps, not crushed but burdened. A second priest steps forward and begins asking questions. Where is the stolen amulet? Who helped you? Did you break the seal of the tomb? The man wheezes out denials. A second block is added. His breath comes harder now. His ribs protest, his face turning purple. Again the questions, again the denials. Somewhere in the crowd, someone whispers that this can go on for hours, that sometimes the stones are not made heavier, but the questions go deeper, more metaphysical. Did you disturb the Ka of the dead? Did the Ba follow you home? One scribe even recorded a case where a man died not from crushing, but from madness. He confessed to crimes he couldn't have committed just to make the pressure stop. The man on the slab finally breaks. He gasps out a name, someone he claims helped him. The priests murmur among themselves. The blocks are removed. Not out of mercy, but to prepare for the next phase. Confession earns no pardon, only clarity. The condemned is taken away. You don't know what his final fate will be, but you can guess. Tomb robbers, once identified, were often mummified, a liver, denied burial altogether. To die without a tomb in Egypt was to lose your soul. That night, as you clean temple floors and refill lamps, your hands tremble. You don't realize it until a priest snaps at you to steady your grip. The oil sloshes. You murmur an apology. He glares. You move on. It's becoming harder to sleep now. Even with your body aching, even with your mind exhausted, you can't shake the images. The man screaming as his scalp is peeled away. The slow rise of stone blocks on a chest that will never fully expand again. And you know deep down that these are just the middle rungs of Egypt's ladder of punishment. There are worse fates. Fates crafted not just to scar the body or break the mind, but to destroy you so completely that not even the gods will recognize your name. You begin the morning with the illusion of calm. The sun warms your shoulders gently. The temple halls are quiet for once, and even the ever-present flies seem to have relocated to torment someone else. For a brief moment, Egypt's cruelty recedes into the background like a receding flood, leaving behind cracked tiles and whispered prayers. You find yourself in the storage courtyard, sweeping up fragments of dried grain husks and listening to the chant of doves. But the peace doesn't last. It never does here. A runner appears, breathless, and delivers a curt message. Report to the embalmers. That's all. No reason. No further instruction. Just those 3 words. And suddenly the calm becomes a trap. The embalming chambers are not known for punishment, but today is different. You arrive at the rear of the temple compound, where the smell hits you first. Resin. Natron. Oils mixed with rot. The chambers are cool, deliberately so, to slow decay. But as you step inside, you realize the body on the table isn't yet dead. He's breathing. Barely. The head embalmer turns toward you. His hands are stained black from bitumen and ink. Hold the tray, he says without looking at you. You do. The man on the slab gaunt, trembling. Eyes wide as not being embalmed in the usual sense. He's being prepared. This is the beginning of one of the most horrifying punishments Egypt ever conceived. Live mummification. Yes, it happened. Not often, not publicly, but there are enough strange footnotes in temple archives and tomb wall inscriptions to suggest that, in extreme case, particularly involving treason or betrayal of the divinia person, might be condemned to be wrapped, blessed, and sealed, while still breathing. You watch as the embalmers begin their work. First, they force a paste of natron and ground limestone into the man's mouth. It sizzles against his tongue. He gags but cannot speak. A thin reed is slid into one nostril, and a trickle of myrrh is poured through, not to preserve, but to burn. Why this man? The whispers say he was a priest who conspired to sell sacred knowledge divine formulas used in royal tomb spells. Whether it's true or not, it doesn't matter. In Egypt, the suggestion is enough. Betray the sacred, and you risk eternal punishment, not just of body, but of soul. Cloth strips are dipped in resin. The embalmers begin to wrap. Arms first. Then legs. The man twitches, moaning behind the crusted natron in his mouth. He's not screaming. Not anymore. That part passed somewhere between the reed and the resin. His eyes blink furiously as they reach his chest. Historians still debate how widespread this punishment was. Most call it mythical, symbolic. But there's a curious inscription in the tomb of a judge from the 18th dynasty that reads, "And so the traitor was given to the oils, that his ka might be bound in silence." Some scholars believe that's poetic. Others say it's chillingly literal. You cannot move. You can only watch as the final bandages are applied. His face is left exposed for now. A priest chants over him, invoking Anubis not as a guide, but as a jailer. The linen twitches once, then stills. You don't know if he's still alive. No one checks. He will be sealed in a small tomb beneath the temple floor, not among the honored dead, but apart, alone, no ceremony, no visitors. A living curse, never to enter the field of reeds, never to reunite with loved ones in the afterlife. You leave the chamber in silence, feet unsteady. As you step into the open air, your lungs grasp at the sunlit dust like it's clean water. But Egypt gives you no time to breathe. Later that day, you're reassigned to the southern gate. You think it's a relief. Less blood, less screaming. But as the afternoon sun begins to fall, another sentence is carried out before your eye zone, deceptively simple. A young man, barely more than a boy, is dragged forward. He's thin, barefoot, and terrified. His hands are tied, but loosely. His mouth is smeared with something brown and thick. You step closer, confused until a guard shouts, "This one lied in court." The punishment? Beating of the feet. On its surface, it sounds mild nothing compared to live mummification or desert exile. But Egypt, as always, knew how to twist the knife. They force him to lie on his stomach, and his feet are tied together at the ankles. A guard produces a flat, paddle-like staff, wrapped in hardened leather and stiffened reeds. Then, without hesitation, he begins to strike. You've never heard screams like these. It isn't the volume, it's the rhythm. The rising panic between each blow. Beating the feet, or bastinado, was designed to avoid lethal injury while maximizing pain. The soles of the feet soft, nerve-rich Khan endure dozens of strikes before bones begin to break, and when they do, the victim can no longer walk, sometimes permanently. This punishment was reserved for liars, petty thieves, runaway servants. It left no visible scars when shoes were worn, but it crippled silently. You overhear a priest explain that it was often applied in staged lashes for a false testimony, 20 for a second offense. One boy, he says, took 50 and never walked again. Another confessed after only 4. As the blows rain down, the young man begs. His words are nearly incoherent. He names names, swears oaths, even calls upon Ma'at herself. But the guard keeps swinging. Not because he hasn't confessed, but because confession is just the start. Punishment still has to be paid. Afterward, they untie him. He tries to stand, collapses. They leave him there, feet swollen and purple, his future reduced to crawling or begging. Another warning etched into flesh. As night falls, the temple walls glow in torchlight. The silence returns. But it's not peace, it's aftermath. You lie on your mat in the servant quarters and stare at the ceiling. The day has folded in on itself layers of horror wrapped in formality. A man sealed in linen, a boy broken by a stick, and between them, a society that just keeps going. Tomorrow, you will be summoned again, and you don't know what waits. But something tells you that the next punishment won't involve cloth or staff but silence. A different kind of mutilation. The kind that leaves a person with no voice at all. The summons comes before sunrise, written in the tight, scratchy ink of a junior scribe, barely trained in proper calligraphy. You recognize the name of the official, who issued Eta temple judge, known not for wisdom, but for theatrical rulings, and a fondness for irony. His nickname among the kitchen workers is the Tongue, not because he speaks well, but because he always finds a way to take yours away literally or figuratively. You don't know who today's condemned is. You're not even sure what role you'll play. The summons only says, "Attend the hall of reproach." That's where minor trials are held, small accusations, disputes over debts or gossip, or blasphemy whispered at the wrong feast. The punishment you're about to witness is rarely spoken of in public, yet everyone knows it exists. As you enter the hall, cool and dimly lit, the accused is already kneeling. A woman, middle-aged, eyes red from crying but unflinching now. Her wrists are tied with palm fiber. She wears the remnants of what was once a noblewoman's dress, now torn and stained. The judge arrives with minimal fanfare. He does not sit on a throne, just a worn stone bench slightly elevated. His scribes line up with wax tablets. A guard leans against the wall, with something gleaming tucked under a cloth. The judge speaks. The accused has slandered a temple elder. She has spoken untruths of divine matters. She has, in the hearing of witnesses, questioned the propriety of a sacred rite. A murmur passes through the court. Not shock, more like anticipation. The kind you hear before a familiar song begins. The judge nods once. The cloth is pulled aside. Beneath it is a set of bronze pincers and a slim obsidian blade. The punishment is immediate. No testimony, No further reading. She is sentenced to tongue removal. Your stomach turns. The process is swift, in a way that almost feels worse than if it had been prolonged. A priest reads a prayer over a tiny figurine of Thoth god of writing and speech. The symbolism is clear. If you misuse words, the god of speech himself withdraws your voice. The guards pry open her mouth. She resists only a little. Maybe she expected this. Maybe she knows that protest won't change the outcome. The pincers go in. The tongue is pulled forward, slick with saliva and terror. The blade comes down. Not once, twice. The first cut isn't clean. The second finishes it. She doesn't scream. Not audibly. Just a wet gurgle. Blood flows down her chin and stains the floor. One scribe collapses. Another calmly records the event. You stand frozen in the corner, holding a linen cloth you were supposed to hand to the priest. No one notices. Eventually, someone else takes it from you and presses it against the woman's mouth. She's led away, head lowered, hands still bound. She'll live, but never speak again. She will carry that empty mouth through markets, temples, and festivals, and everyone will know. This is a woman who used her words too freely. Some believe the punishment originated during the Second Intermediate Period, when rival rulers sought to silence dissent without making martyrs. Others claim it was more spiritual part of the belief that untruth poisoned the soul. Removing the tongue, then, was like draining venom from a wound. A fringe scholar once argued that such punishments were metaphorical and allegory for social exile. But a recently unearthed ostracon from Deir el-Medina contains a sketch of the process pincers, blade, screaming face too vivid to be fictional. As the blood is washed from the stone floor with vinegar and sand, the judge looks satisfied, not triumphant, just methodical. Another lesson taught. You leave the hall in a daze, your ears still ringing with the absence of sound, the way her cries didn't quite escape her throat. Outside, the city is wide awake. Merchants shout. Children chase each other with sticks. Life continues, indifferent. You wander aimlessly until you reach a narrow alley between two mud-brick walls, where you hear a different kind of punishment being whispered, the grain theft dilemma. A cluster of men surround a boy skinny, barefoot, and maybe 12. His tunic bulges at the sides. A market stall owner pulls open the cloth and reveals handfuls of barley, not enough to feed a family, but enough to count as a crime. They don't beat him. They don't report him to the guard. Instead, they make him eat it. All of it, raw. He is forced to sit in the dirt while a priest watches. He chews mouthful after mouthful of hard, dry barley until his jaw trembles. It's not meant to kill him, but the pain, the choking, the humiliation, it all leaves a mark. You overhear someone whisper, better to fill him with what he tried to steal than to waste rope or coin. This was common in poorer districts. Small thefts met with punishments crafted on the spot rooted in ritual, superstition, or sheer pettiness. There's even a papyrus from the reign of Horemheb, describing a man who was forced to sleep beside his stolen bread every night for a week, unable to eat it, just lie beside it. Punishment in Egypt wasn't always formal. Sometimes it was improvised, poetic, cruel in its creativity. As the boy begins to gag on his 8th mouthful, the crowd finally disperses. Someone tosses a few figs beside him and says, "Learn next time to be invisible." You turn and walk back toward the temple, where silence now feels like a threat. You've seen tongues cut, mouths forced full, and dignity eroded in the most ordinary of places. And somehow, you sense the worst is still to come, because punishment in Egypt didn't always happen in life. Sometimes, it waited. Sometimes, it began the moment your heart stopped beating and the gods got involved. The next morning, you're sent on an errand to the temple's inner archivia, long, low chamber, cut into the sandstone, cooled by its own darkness. You pass through rows of scroll shelves, each holding bundles of tightly wound papyri. Some are tax records, others are prayer manuals, but the ones that catch your eye today are far more ominous. They're labeled with a single word judgment. You pause beside one and pull it gently from the shelf. The seal is already broken. Inside is a record of a man named Paneku, a tomb painter. He was never arrested, never whipped, never branded. But his story is a warning all the same, because his punishment didn't arrive in a courtroom. It arrived after death. The Egyptians believed the afterlife was not guaranteed. You didn't simply die and go somewhere nice. You had to earn it. The heart was weighed against the feather of Ma'at in the Hall of Two Truths. If the heart was too heavy with lies, betrayal, or impure thoughts, it was devoured by the demon Ammit, and the soul was erased. This was known as the second death, and it terrified people more than any earthly punishment ever could. You keep reading. Paneku, it says, was found to have painted false symbols into a noble's tomb, small changes, barely visible, that altered spells and names. Whether it was sabotage or a mistake, the priesthood couldn't be sure. The man had already died by the time they discovered it. But justice, in Egypt, didn't stop at the grave. The scroll details how priests were sent to his tomb. They chiseled out his name, not just from the wall, but from every public record they could find. His statues were destroyed. His body, already mummified, was dug up and reburied in a donkey skin, a material considered impure and associated with Seth, god of chaos. He was denied ritual oils, denied offerings, and most importantly, denied a name. Without one, he could never speak it to the gods, never open the gates of the afterlife. This was damnatio memoriae, erasure of memory, an unmaking that turned your existence into dust. The Egyptians called it Hefet Sekhemtha, punishment of the soul. You shiver. You've seen lashings and mummifications, but nothing feels more cruel than this, a punishment so complete that it follows you beyond death into eternity. Later that day, as you clean votive lamps in the outer courtyard, a scribe nearby tells a different version of the same story. He claims the priests didn't just rewrap the body in donkey skin. They cut off the feet so the soul couldn't walk, buried the corpse facing the wrong direction so it couldn't find the duat, the path to the afterlife. Whether any of that is true or just temple rumor, you don't know. But the image sticks with you. A man, dead, stripped of his identity, blind and lost in the dark forever. And then you hear the drum beat. Slow, ritualistic, not like the public floggings or the procession of the dung smeared. This rhythm is different, steady, ceremonial. You follow it, past the outer pillars of the temple, toward a large sunken chamber you've never entered before. It smells of oil and sandalwood, and the air feels colder, like it doesn't belong to this part of the world. A group of priests stands around a circular platform, at the center of which is a large stone scale knot, metaphorical, actual, the size of a wagon, built to mirror the mythical one used in the afterlife. And there, on one side, lies a heart, freshly removed, still slick with blood. On the other side sits a carved alabaster feather. The room falls silent. This is the ritual of Falswainga, rare and controversial practice that mimics the Hall of Judgment, only on earth. It is meant to test whether a man or woman has died true of voice. It was used when no punishment could be agreed upon in life, when rumors followed someone beyond the grave, when there was political need to tarnish a rival family, or religious uncertainty about someone's purity. The heart, carefully removed from the deceased and kept from burial, is weighed in front of a feather carved to divine proportions, always slightly lighter than a real one. That's the trick. The scale is tilted ever so slightly toward guilt. A priest steps forward and announces the deceased's name. Senebai, former scribe of Karnak. You feel the tension in the room. This is not just a weighing, this is a verdict. If the heart outweighs the feather end, of course. It always does. The corpse will be mutilated, the burial rites halted, and the family cursed by association. And that's exactly what happens. The priest frowns, gestures solemnly, and two others carry away the heart on a tray. The family doesn't protest. They knew this was coming. The tomb will not be completed. The soul will not be guided. In some sense, Cenobi has just died again. Historians still argue whether these ritual weighings were literal or symbolic. Some say the hearts were animal substitutes, the ceremonies private and psychological, but others point to fragments found in Theban burial pitch hearts stored in separate jars, labeled with different names, never buried, just locked away. And you? You've just seen it happen. You leave the chamber in a daze and wander into the sunlight. The Nile sparkles beyond the walls. Life carries on. A woman sells lotus roots. A fisherman drags in a net. Somewhere nearby, someone laughs. But all you can think of is the weight of that heart on the scale. The silence that followed. The quiet cruelty of a punishment that waits for no judge, no witness, not even life itself. And, as you return to your quarters, you wonder how many of Egypt's dead lie, restless, unremembered, erased by chisels, or forgotten by design. How many ghosts drift along the riverbanks, nameless and featherless? You don't sleep that night, because the next punishment is waiting in the real world again, and this time it will be carried out by the temple animal screechers, sacred, untouchable, and terrifying. The morning arrives heavy with heat and tension. The temple's outer corridors feel unusually quiet, as if even the priests are choosing their steps carefully today. You're summoned early not to clean, not to serve, but to witness. There's no scroll this time, just a one-word message whispered by a guard as he passed your quarters at dawn. Zoo. You didn't even know the temple had a zoo. Most don't. But some of the larger temples, especially in the Delta regions, kept sacred animals. Not for entertainment, for ritual, for symbolism, for punishment. You follow the guard to a gated enclosure behind a set of high limestone walls. It smells of straw, sweat, and dung. But beneath that, something sharper like warm iron. You hear a grunt, then a hiss, then silence. In the center of the courtyard is a cage the size of a market cart. Inside, pacing slowly, is a leopard slender, golden, eyes too intelligent to be comforting. Across from it, chained to a stake, kneels a man. Thin, wild-eyed, knees shaking. He mumbles something you can't hear. This is not execution. Not exactly. This is divine retribution by sacred animal. In ancient Egypt, certain creatures were more than animals. They were avatars, vessels of gods, crocodiles for Sobek, baboons for Thoth, cats for Bastet, bulls for Apis, even hippos for Tawaret. To harm one was sacrilege, but to be killed by one? That was justice. Especially if your crime involved temple blasphemy or violating oaths made in the gods' names. The man before you, according to hushed whispers, was a merchant who sold fake relics to pilgrims, claimed his amulets bore Osiris's blessing. When confronted, he doubled down, swearing oaths by the gods that he knew were false. So, the gods will now judge him directly. A priest steps forward and recites a brief invocation in a monotone voice. It's less a prayer than a legal formality. Then he signals. The cage is opened. The leopard doesn't pounce. That's the worst part. It moves slowly, deliberately. The man doesn't run. His chain won't let him. He tries to crawl backward, whimpering. You look away just before the cat strikes. You hear the crunch, the brief scream, then nothing. You force yourself to look again. The man is still. The leopard stands over him, not feeding, just staring. It is not hunger that drove it. It was purpose. The animal turns, licks its paw, and walks back into its cage. A priest closes the gate. The crowd begins to chant softly, not for the man, but for the God whose wrath has just been made flesh. Later, a scribe you've come to trust whispers to you, "They used to do this with baboons. In the Old Kingdom, locked a man in a chamber with two of them. The animals were trained to recognize the scent of certain herbs rubbed on the accused. They'd tear him apart, limb by limb." Said it pleased Thoth. You hope he's exaggerating. But he shows you a damaged tablet in his bag. It shows a carving two baboons, a chained figure, a pool of blood. The glyph for truth is carved above the scene. Maybe it's metaphor. Maybe not. You pass a stone basin on your way back to the upper levels and pause. Carved into its edge is a lion, its claws extended, tearing into a serpent. A forgotten god? A warning? You don't know. Egypt has so many layers, each one sharpened by its own cruelty. You think about that man in the courtyard. How he died for lying. But not lying in the usual sense, lying with the gods. This form of punishment was rare, yes, but effective. No one forgets what they see when sacred animals are involved. It burns into the mind, and yet there are worse sentences. Because soon after, you're sent to the wall, not to look out, but to look up. A new prisoner has been chained there right into the stone itself, ankles and wrists pinned into iron brackets, set deep into the temple's public outer wall. His name is painted above his head. His crime, below. He will hang there until the sun takes him, or the birds do. This is the temple wall chains. You've heard of it. A warning made of flesh, a human notice board. The man's crime? Unknown to most. But a priest mutters to another that he spread rumors about the pharaoh's divine dreams, said they were not visions from the gods, but delusions. Maybe he was mad. Maybe he was telling the truth. Doesn't matter now. What matters is that he's on display. Children throw pebbles at his feet. Merchants glance as they pass. Pilgrims recite blessings, but no one helps. That's the point. He is not there to suffer privately. He is there so others may absorb the lesson. You stay until the sun reaches its peak. The man's skin is already blistered, his lips cracked. No one gives him water, no one speaks to him, and still, his eyes are open. You retreat to the shade, dazed. Historians argue whether these wall punishments were regional unique to certain cities like Memphis or Thebesor, whether they were part of a wider legal tradition that simply left few written records. The visual evidence, though, is clear. Graffiti carved into cliffside temples. Images of men dangling from ropes beneath depictions of Maat and Horus. The message was simple. Say nothing that disturbs the gods' dreams. That night, your dreams are nothing but stone and heat and fur and claws. Egypt is not merely punishing criminals, it is sculpting its society with fear. And tomorrow? Tomorrow, someone else will hang. But not on a wall. They will be buried alive in sand this time, but with the very people they betrayed. You wake before sunrise, drenched in sweat, heart racing from dreams of claws scraping against stone, and feathers weighing hearts not your own. There's no summons today, no parchment, no whispered command. But somehow, your feet carry you toward the necropolis, as if something's pulling you, something ancient and deliberate. You pass between rows of tombs still under construction, scaffolding rising like ribs from the desert. The morning wind carries dust, and the faint scent of bitumen, and something else, something fresher. By the time you reach the pit, a small crowd has already formed silent, still, as if any movement might trigger the gods themselves. No one speaks, no one dares. This isn't a public punishment in the usual sense. It's too solemn for that. Too final. Before you, half shadowed by the rising sun, is an open tomb newly dug but not yet sealed. Around it, 4 figures kneel in loose linen wrappings, their hands bound, their faces uncovered. You recognize none of them. One weeps silently. Another stares blankly at the sand, already gone in his mind. The others are statues' faces locked in unreadable expressions. Behind them, a fifth figure stands. The accused. Or rather, the betrayer. He's the one being punished today. The others? His victims. Or, so the story goes. This is the Nightjack's curse, a punishment so specific, so horrific, that most temple scribes avoid even writing it down. It's reserved for those who betray the dead. Grave robbers, tomb informants, and worst of all traitors among tomb workers themselves. The man before you was a guardian, assigned to protect royal crypts during their sealing. He knew the spells, knew the secret passages, and he sold them for gold, for wine, for status no one seems to know. What matters is that his information led to the desecration of sacred tombs, the remains of royal children pulled from their resting places, canopic jars smashed, hieroglyphs carved away in search of buried treasure. But the priests did not execute him. Number. That would be too fast. Instead, they summoned the Nightjacks. Not a name you say aloud easily. It refers to a group of masked embalmer priests whose duty is to enact this most feared sentence, entombing the living with the dead they betrayed. The four wrapped figures are not criminals. They are the recovered remains of the desecrated tombs, pulled from where they were left stripped, broken, discarded, and now prepared anew, re-wrapped in linens, painted with fresh pigments, their faces restored with sculpted plaster masks. And now, they will be buried again, properly, with company. The priests step forward. The betrayer doesn't resist. He has been drugged, perhaps, or maybe the weight of his crime has already broken him. They guide him into the tomb. It is large enough for 5. Wide slabs of sandstone form the base. A painted ceiling above shows the sky goddess Nut swallowing the sun. The dead are laid out in position north, south, east, and west. And in the center, they lay the traitor. Alive. No binding now. No writhing. He simply lies there, hands across his chest, staring at the cracked ceiling, waiting. One priest places a single coin on his tongue. Not as payment to cross into the afterlife, but as an insult, a bribe for silence. Then the lid begins to lower. A heavy stone slab. Slow. Grinding. The only sound in the necropolis is the sand shifting beneath your feet. When the final crack of light disappears, the priests begin sealing the tomb. Some say this punishment originated during the reign of Seti I, when rumors of royal tomb theft shook the court to its core. A record in the tomb workers' village at Deir el-Medina mentions a sleeper among the honored dead, buried with those he helped unearth. But scholars argue over the phrasing. Was it literal or poetic? After today, you no longer wonder. And what does the sentence accomplish? The dead are honored anew. The traitor is erased without shedding blood. His soul is trapped not just in the physical tomb, but in the memory of those who watched. Like you, the crowd begins to disperse. Not a word is spoken, not a glance exchanged. You walk back through the maze of tomb walls, past hieroglyphs that now feel more like threats than blessings. At the edge of the necropolis, you pause. Someone left an offering at a half-built shrine, a basket of dates, a piece of folded linen, and oddly a mirror. The glass is cracked. You stare into it anyway. You don't recognize the face looking back. Back at the temple, the day unfolds as usual. Incense lit, scrolls copied, scribes scratching. But beneath it all is the unspoken knowledge that one of them is now in the ground, breathing dust. That night, sleep doesn't come. When it finally does, you dream of tight stone spaces and mouths filled with coins. But tomorrow's punishment will be different. Because sometimes, Egypt didn't punish the traitor. It punished his children. The next day begins with the sound of weeping. Not the kind you've grown used to, the muffled sobs of the accused, or the broken gasps of someone just branded. This is different. Higher. Shriller. It cuts through the usual chants and clatter of temple routine, like a reed flute in a funeral march. You follow the noise, not by command but by instinct, drawn through the temple's northern arcade to a small amphitheater where minor sentences are sometimes carried out. But today, there's no criminal, no accused. Only a woman, veiled and shaking, clutching the hands of two small children, neither older than 10. They are not here as witnesses. They are here as punishment. The priest overseeing the ceremony doesn't shout. He barely raises his voice. He reads from a narrow scroll, his tone flat as he declares the father of the children a former city official, guilty of high treason, conspiracy, and false prophecy. The man himself is already dead, executed quietly, away from public eyes. But now comes the second sentence. Let his lineage be smitten. You've read of this before, you just never thought you'd see it. Collective punishment in ancient Egypt was rare, but not unheard of, especially in cases of political unrest or threats to the divine order. The logic, if you could call it that, was chillingly simple. If one person's treachery could poison Ma'at, then all those tied to him by blood might carry the same stain, and the stain had to be scrubbed out. The children are led forward slowly, barefoot, wrists loosely bound. The girl stumbles. The boy keeps his eyes locked on the crowd. You see no fear in him, only confusion. Two guards step out with ceremonial staffs, decorated not with blades but with inscriptions, the weapons of shame, not death. The punishment is not execution, it is disinheritance by ritual. Their names will be struck from public records, their birth status revoked. They will be declared non-person orphans with no lineage, no claim to land, no right to serve in temples or inherit their mother's dowry. They will not be allowed to marry within respectable classes. They will become shadows. The priest dips a reed pen in red ink and writes their names onto a clay tablet. Then he smashes it beneath his sandal. The girl cries. The boy still does not. A branding iron is brought forward, small, precise, shaped like a single glyph. Ket, bastard, illegitimate, a mark reserved for those whose blood has been politically cursed. The boy goes first. He does not scream. The iron touches the inside of his forearm and sizzles. The girl follows. Her cry is short, swallowed by her mother's robe as the woman throws herself over her child. When it's done, the priest unrolls the final part of the decree. The children are to be taken into temple servitude, working as groundsweepers and reed cutters, far from the district their father once governed. They are forbidden from ever using their family name again. If they try, the mark on their skin will say otherwise. You turn away. You're not the only one. Later, you ask a scribe quietly if this is legal, if children can be punished for the crimes of their parents. He shrugs and mutters, the laws of Ma'at apply to all. If a house is corrupt, do you cleanse the walls or tear down the whole structure? You press him again. Has this happened before? He nods slowly. In the reign of Akhenaten, whole families vanished from the ledgers. Not murdered. Just deleted. Children made to forget their own fathers. He sighs. It's cleaner than blood, more permanent. Some scholars today insist that collective punishments were rare exceptions, usually tied to civil unrest or religious purges. But in the temple archives, buried beneath prayers and tax lists, there are scattered records fragments mentioning branded children, erased family trees, servants with forbidden tattoos. You return to the temple courtyard to find the children already gone. Taken, likely, to some minor outpost on the edge of the marshes. You imagine them sweeping floors with raw, bandaged arms, their names buried deeper than any tomb. And you can't help but wonder, what happens if they survive? If they grow up and remember everything? That thought lingers long into the evening. But it is pushed aside by another summons. This one formal, sealed with wax, and bearing the falcon crest of Horus. You're to attend a festival at the Western Chaplain Honor, the scroll says. You go, hesitant, and when you arrive, it seems joyous. Flowers, music, dancers swirling in gold-threaded linen. You start to believe that maybe for once, the temple means to celebrate rather than condemn. But then you see the circle of guards near the central dais. And in the middle of that dais, barefoot and blindfolded, stands a trembling figure. You recognize the posture, the slack shoulders of someone who knows they are about to suffer. This is execution by ceremonial dance. It sounds ridiculous, even festive. But that's the cruelty. It was created to mask punishment as ritual, to disguise state-sanctioned vengeance as worship. The condemned is dressed in festival attire, robes borrowed from the temple wardrobe, a wreath of papyrus blossoms on his head. A priest places a rattle in his hands and says, "Dance for the gods." The man begins to move, awkwardly. Not because he's unwilling, but because he doesn't know the steps. That's the trap. The dancers around him are trained. Their movements flow like water, perfectly synchronized. But he stumbles, he falters. Every mistake earns a sharp note on a sistrum. The crowd laughs politely, unsure whether this is entertainment or punishment. You already know the answer. With each misstep, the dancers close in. Their movements become harsher, their painted eyes narrow. One slaps him gently, but deliberately. Another knocks the rattle from his hand. Still, the priests urge him on. By the end, he is not dancing. He is staggering, barefoot on burning stone, his blindfold soaked in sweat. He collapses. The priests do not help him. They declare the dance concluded. Later, you learn he was accused of mocking the sacred procession of Bastet. Not in public, in private. But someone heard. Someone always hears. And what better way to punish mockery of a goddess of music and joy than by turning punishment into performance? You walk away, head spinning, not from heat, from the knowledge that Egypt doesn't just punish the body or soul. It punishes through beauty. Even elegance can kill. The next morning arrives cloaked in silence, not the ceremonial kind that follows incense or prayers, not even the tense, fearful hush that precedes a public punishment. This silence is different, more like a breath held too long, the temple's very walls reluctant to speak. Something is coming. You feel it in your chest before anyone says a word. You're summoned to the scriptorium, the room where scribes work. You expect scrolls, ink, maybe another grim tale to copy. Instead, you're given a task so simple it terrifies you. Carry a sealed basket to the southern chapel. That's all. No escort, no explanation. Just the weight of something that rustles inside like it's alive. You walk slowly. The basket shifts with every step, too light for grain, too heavy for cloth. You dare not open it. At the chapel, a priest waits. He lifts the lid, nods, and carefully removes what's inside. A wide strip of stiffened linen, folded into a triangle, with a small bone needle threaded through one edge. You've heard of this. Everyone has. But no one speaks of it above a whisper. It's the tool used in the lip-sewing sentence. Yes, that's real, and you're about to witness it. The condemned is already in place. A man in his 30s, face bruised, eyes swollen. He sits on his knees in the center of the chapel floor. Surrounding him are priests, not the usual ones who chant for the gods, but specialists. Enforcers of silence. Instruments of the temple's need for control. The punishment? Gossip. Not theft, not murder. Just words too many, spoken too freely about someone high in the priesthood. the kind of talk that spreads like ink on papyrus, staining everything it touches. In a society built on divine order, such stains are unacceptable. One priest holds the man's head steady. Another carefully unfolds the linen strip and begins to stitch, yes, literally stitch the man's lips together, not through the flesh, but with small punctures in the corners of the mouth, the thread looped tightly around to hold his lips shut. The thread is soaked in bitumen to harden as it dries. He does not scream. He cannot. The pain is not the worst part, it's the message. Once the stitching is complete, the man is wrapped in a loose veil and led to the outer gates, where he will sit for 3 days in silence. Anyone who speaks to him risks being labeled a sharer of lies. And when the thread is finally removed, he still won't speak. No one will listen. Not anymore. Some say this punishment came from the desert oases, where priests feared the spreading of false visions. Others believe it emerged during the turbulent reign of Hatshepsut, when whispers could become weapons. Regardless of its origin, the lip-sewing ceremony was never officially recorded in temple law, but it appears in marginal notes and obscure graffiti, always drawn with a little figure, mouth shut, eyes wide. The man is taken away, hunched, broken not by blade but by silencing. But Egypt does not pause. Later that day, you're reassigned to the central kitchen to assist with the funeral, baking the preparation of offerings for the dead. Bread, dates, a pomegranate or two if the family is wealthy. You expect dull work. Instead, you find a boy. A child no older than 10. He's kneading dough with hands red and swollen. A cook leans toward you and mutters, "Stole from the granary. They gave him to us." This is not formal punishment. This is reassignment by shame. The child is not paid. He is not taught. He is simply worked. His hands burn from the heat of the ovens. His fingers are cut from rough grinding stones. He is fed lastiff at all. And each time someone asks who he is, the answer is always the same. No one important. One of the grain thieves. You've heard of this practice. Children caught stealing from the public granaries were sometimes spared to formal sentencing, but only if they were useful. Sent to temples, kitchens, quarries, marked not with tattoos, but with memory. Everyone knows what they did. Everyone reminds them. It lasts longer than a scar. There is an ostracon from the early Ramesside period, found near a labor camp, which describes a child condemned to live among the wheat, but never taste it. Another tale says the boy grew old grinding flour for offerings. Never once allowed to enter the temple himself. The cooks say, the boy you're watching will probably be here for years, until his back gives out, or someone forgets what he stole, whichever comes last. As you leave the kitchen, the heat hits you like a furnace. The Nile glimmers in the distance, mocking your thirst. And then comes the final summons of the day, delivered by a senior scribe with a tight mouth and tired eyes. You are to assist in the southern archives, with a burial, but not of a person, of a name. When you arrive, the task is already in motion. A team of scribes is gathered around a large slab of stone, chiseling with unusual care. They're erasing a name letter by letter, stroke by stroke. You ask whose. They don't answer, but you see it in their faces. This isn't just censorship. This is the final punishment, the erasure of identity, worse than lip-sewing, worse than flogging or exile. Because when your name is removed from the records, you never existed. The Egyptians believed names held power. Without a name, your soul couldn't be spoken to in the afterlife. No offerings could reach you. No rituals could protect you. To lose your name was to lose your immortality. A priest nearby mutters, "He spoke falsely in the Hall of Records, claimed the harvest was more than it was, caused a famine, dozens died. So now he dies again." The scribes continue, chisel, dust, chisel, dust. And when they're done, They melt wax over the stone to hide the scars. As if he was never there, you walk home in silence. You pass the boy from the kitchen, now scrubbing pots. You glimpse the lip-stitched man, seated in shadow, flies circling his head. You wonder who you'll be if you ever make a mistake, if anyone will know your name once it's gone. Because here in Egypt, the worst punishments don't always bleed. Sometimes they whisper. Sometimes they vanish. You've barely begun sweeping the outer causeway when the sun reaches its zenith and the heat begins to bite through your robe like boiling sand through linen. The stones beneath your feet shimmer, and your skin feels brittle, ready to crack. Still, you sweep. That's your task for today. Mundane, mindless, and almost comforting after the horrors of recent days. Then the silence breaks. A bell. One solitary chime from the high wall near the eastern gate. Not the bronze clamor of alarm, but the deep, slow clang that announces an impending judgment. No priest shouts. No scroll is unfurled, but the sound is unmistakable. Everyone freezes. Even the cats slink away. This bell means one of the gods is displeased. And when that happens, punishment becomes creative. You follow the trail of temple workers moving silently toward the eastern courtyard, drawn like moths to fire. At the center of the gathering is a group of robed priests surrounding a man kneeling in front of a decorated pedestal. He's shaking. Around him are 7 small baskets each containing a folded strip of cloth, a jar of pigment, and a mirror. You realize what's happening before anyone speaks. This is hair removal by flame. The sentence is not recorded in most legal texts. It's old. Older than any dynasty. A form of penance wrapped in ritual, used when someone has lied while under sacred oath, particularly during initiations, oaths of office, or priestly ceremonies. If you swore something before a god and then broke it, your soul wasn't just guilty, it was flammable. Egyptians believed hair carried divine memory. It was sacred. The beard of Osiris, the headdress of Horus, the plates of Hathorthes weren't just fashion. They were symbols of power, truth, continuity. To burn a person's hair was to sever their divine connection. It was a purification, but a violent one. The condemned is accused of false prophecy. A young priest who claimed to have received visions from Ra himself. He fooled a handful of novices, nearly caused a schism in one of the lesser temples. But now the truth has emerged. He was hallucinating, driven by poppy elixirs and arrogance. The head priest begins the rite by unrolling the cloths from the baskets. Each contains a mixture of beeswax, crushed incense resin, and flammable oil. A junior priest dips a reed in the oil and lights it from a brazier. You hold your breath. One by one, the man's braids are undone. A priest brushes the sacred oil into his scalp and beard. Then, with no warning, the torch is passed quickly across the tips of the hair. Not enough to set him ablaze. Just enough to ignite the oil and singe the strands, producing a short, sharp flash and a horrific smell. The man shrieks. They continue, section by section, burning every lock, every curl, until his head and face are bare, blistered, and soot-blackened. The hair is gathered in a basket and sealed. Later, you learn, it will be buried far from any temple cut off, not just from his body, but from the world of the gods entirely. Some scholars argue this was merely symbolic, but the records say otherwise. There are scrolls that describe priests unable to serve again after such punishment. Even after their hair regrew, they were considered ritually bald, spiritually amputated. The man is led away in silence, a blackened shell. He'll live, but he'll never serve in a holy space again, and no one, not even a beggar, will ask for his blessing. You remain standing there, nauseated by the smell, until a priest taps your shoulder and hands you a jug. "Come," he says. "The next one begins." You expect another flogging, another branding. But what you see next is stranger than anything yet. At the southern edge of the complex stands a small, stone tomb, the kind used for commoners. But today, it's open, waiting. Beside it stands a man, arms bound behind him, wearing nothing but a donkey skin. You blink, unsure. The heat is playing tricks. But no, it's real. This is cursed burial in donkey skins. It's rare, very rare, reserved for those who not only defied the gods but did so mockingly, those who scorned the rites, laughed at the gods, insulted the divine order. Wearing donkey skin is significant. In Egypt, the donkey was associated with Set, the god of chaos, storms, and destruction. To wrap a man in that symbol was to declare him enemy of Ma'at, unworthy of burial, unworthy of protection in the afterlife. The condemned today is said to have disrupted a sacred procession by mocking the chants, pretending to be a priest, and urinating on a temple floor. Whether drunk or mad, it makes no difference. He is led to the tomb not grand, not prepared. Just a hole in the ground, lined with dry bricks. No amulets, no incense, no blessings. His donkey wrap is tightened, and then they lower him in. Alive? You don't know. He doesn't struggle, just lies flat, face to the stone wall, waiting. There's a theory among fringe Egyptologists that such burials weren't always literal, that they were stories meant to scare novices, but there are too many traces, too many references to the chaos robes, the burials of Set's embrace, too many warnings carved in stone. May your soul not wear the donkey's skin. You help carry the ceiling slab. It's heavy. You feel every grain of sand on its surface, and when it's finally dropped into place, the sound it makes is absolute. And then, it's done. Another man erased, not by blade or fire, by ritual and symbolism. The priests leave without speaking. One hands you a small vial of perfume to wipe away the scent. You don't use it. You just sit there, staring at the tomb, wondering what comes next. Because the punishments are evolving. They're no longer just meant to inflict pain. They're designed to erase status, break identity, redefine a person's place in the world and in the next one. And soon, you hear whispers of the next sentence. One that hides beneath the music and pageantry of temple rites, dancing again. But this time, not for gods. This time, it's for survival. The next day arrives not with drums, nor the clang of temple bells, but with music soft, lilting, almost sweet. You hear it before you even open your eyes. A sistrum rattling gently, the hum of flutes, and feet shuffling over polished stone. For a brief moment, you wonder if the festival has arrived early. Maybe, just maybe, this day will be different. Then you remember. The dancers, and the punishment you were warned about. You dress quickly and follow the sound toward the eastern processional court, where priests often rehearse their seasonal rituals. But today, there is no festival, no offerings, no joyous procession, only a wide-open circle, outlined with chalk and incense dust, and at its center, a woman. She is barefoot, eyes wide, limbs trembling. Around her, 7 dancers move in slow unison, their linen robes bright, their eyes painted like falcons, and in their hands rattles, ribbons, and sharpened sticks, instruments of beauty and of torment. This is execution by ceremonial dance, but not like the last one you saw. This version is harsher, honed by years of ritual, into something almost clinical in its cruelty. The priests call it the dance of disgrace, and it's reserved for those who offend not just the gods, but the temple's dignity. Its punishment, dressed in silk and saffron. The woman was a singer. Once. A temple musician who led chants during funerals and solar rites. But according to the whispers you hear around the edge of the circle, she refused to perform a sacred hymn, claimed the god in question was false, that the ritual was empty. No one repeats what she said exactly. No one dares. But now, her feet must prove her devotion. One of the dancers circles her, arms extended, ribbons fluttering like wings. The rest echo her steps, a slow spiral closing inward. The woman tries to mimic them. She fails. A sistrum rattles. A priest calls. Again. She stumbles. Again. The sticks come down not on her arms or back, but on her heels. Sharp taps, rhythmic, punishing only just enough to sting. They are careful not to cripple. Yet, the purpose is not death, not even mutilation. It is humiliation through art. She must dance. She must remember every beat, every step of a song she dared to call false. And she must do so while being watched by acolytes, scribes, servants, by people like you. Each time she falters, the dancers strike her feet again. Not hard enough to draw blood, just hard enough to burn. She tries to copy them, but the dance is complex symbolic of the sunrise, of the rebirth of Ra. Every step missed is a strike against the sun itself. The punishment continues for over an hour. Her legs quiver, her breathing becomes ragged, but she doesn't cry. That, in some twisted way, seems to annoy the priests. Eventually, the high dancer circles in front of her, points a finger, and utters the word, unworthy. The music stops. The woman is led from the circle, not carried. She walks, barely, her heels raw, her dignity in shreds. She'll never sing again. That's not an assumption. It's part of the sentence. Temple musicians are said to be voices of the divine. To stumble in ritual dance is to break your instrument. From now on, she is a vessel with no sound. A priest steps forward and tosses crushed flowers into the circle. Another sweeps away the chalk, as if nothing happened. You stay behind, unable to move. And while others leave, you notice something at the edge of the courteman, old and bent, clutching a cane, whispering a chant under his breath. He notices you watching and calls you over. You saw it, didn't you? He rasps. That was how they punished dancers in my day too. But it's older than this temple. Older than Thebes. Goes back to when gods danced the sky into motion. And when one stopped, he shrugs. They fell. You ask him why they don't just punish with blades. Why wrap cruelty in elegance? He chuckles. Because blood stains the stone. Shame. Shame lasts longer. Later that evening, you're asked to deliver incense to the temple of Bastet, goddess of music, joy, and ironically punishment. You think you'll be spared for the day, but as you enter the inner sanctum, you see another punishment unfolding. A young woman is kneeling, hands bound, as a cat-sleek, golden-eyed paces around her. The priestess nearby notices your confusion and explains, she spoke harshly in the sanctuary, swore during ritual. Now she must be judged by the goddess. The cat approaches, sniffs the woman's hand, and slaps it with a paw. The room exhales. That's it, the priestess says. She will be fined and sent to clean litter trays for 3 months. You almost laugh. But you realize it's no joke. In Egypt, punishment was always tied to the nature of the offense. Defy music. You dance until your feet bleed. Desecrate joy? You serve joy's sacred animal. The punishment matches the crime. Always. And the worst ones? Those are saved for when you offend the gods themselves. Not in private, not by accident, but publicly, loudly, with pride. And that's what's coming next. Because someone has committed the unthinkable. They forged a divine name. And Egypt will not forgive that. The morning haze hangs low over the temple courtyards, sticky and thick as wet linen. You can taste the coppery tang of incense long extinguished. Somewhere in the distance, a conch shell sounds a call not to worship, but to witness. You've learned the difference by now. Worship smells of oil and lotus. Judgment smells like iron, wax, and dust. Today, punishment will not take place in a hidden court or narrow hallway. It unfolds in the open plaza, where even the sun can't help but look on. You push your way through a growing crowd and see the altar has already been raised. It's a low platform of polished red granite, flanked by two tall standards bearing banners of Horus and Thoth gods of kingship and truth. Between them kneels a man, chest bare, head shaved, limbs trembling. You hear the whispers ripple around you. He forged a divine name. The weight of that accusation presses down harder than 1,000 lashes. You know the law. Everyone does. To write a god's name is sacred. To forge it, alter it, sell it for bribes or political gain, this is cosmic vandalism, a crime against the very order of the universe. You do not touch the names of gods unless your hands are clean, unless your heart is lighter than a feather. But this man? A mid-level scribe, some say. Others claim he was a copyist in a regional temple who changed a name in a land grant to favor a noble house. Just one glyph altered, a swirl instead of a reed, a single mark, but enough to imply divine approval where there was none, a signature stolen from a god. Now he must be unwritten. The high priest steps forward, flanked by two junior priests carrying jarson of clay, one of limestone. He speaks not to the crowd, but to the gods. A declaration of cosmic insult, a plea for restoration, and then, in front of everyone, he lifts the man's hand and burns away his fingertips. The limestone jar contains quicklime mixed with ash. It is daubed across the man's fingers, already raw from sanded stone. Then a coal is pressed to each tip briefly, precisely. He screams, he thrashes, but the priests hold him still. The punishment is not meant to kill. It's meant to prevent writing. He will never again grip a reed pen. His fingertips will harden into useless stubs. His ability to alter language, to speak on behalf of divine order, is erased. Next, the priest lifts a second brush, dipped in red ink. He paints across the man's forehead a large glyph. Who defiled? It will fade in time, but not before hundreds, maybe thousands, see it. And that's not the end. The man is not to be executed. Number. His punishment continues with temple exile. He will be banished to the limestone quarries near Tura, sentenced to carve stone blocks under the blazing sun, not to write, but to chisel. His crime against the written word will be atoned for through unending labor. You hear someone near you whisper, "At least he was spared the tongue," but others shake their heads. Better to lose your tongue than your hands. You try to leave, but the priest waves you forward. He needs someone to carry the ink-stained brushes back to the cleansing basin. You nod. You walk. As you carry them, you feel their heat sticky from blood, still sharp with the sting of red ochre. You realize then that Egypt never punishes only one part of the body. Every punishment here is total. It wraps around your purpose, your past, and your place in the world. But punishment isn't always about the gods. Sometimes it's about taxes. That same afternoon, you're sent with a runner to the district records. Office in airless chambers stacked with reed paper scrolls and etched tablets. You expect tedium, but inside, the atmosphere is electric. A man is being held down across a low writing desk. He's sobbing. This is the blinding of the tax evaders. You've heard stories. Not many. No one talks about this one for long. The man on the desk is a merchant. He's accused of falsifying his harvest reports, hiding entire shipments of barley in underground silos to avoid grain tax. His case was brought before temple officials 2 months ago. He appealed. He failed. Now the sentence is being carried out. A thin metal rod, blackened at one end, rests on hot coals in a brazier. When it glows, the assistant priest lifts it gently and walks to the man's head. His eyelids are forced open. You turn away before the sound. There's no screaming, oddly. Just one long, low moan, like the desert wind before a storm. When it's over, the man is left on the floor, shaking. He'll survive, but blind. A permanent reminder to every trader, scribe, and farmer who passes him by. Truth is not optional. He will be sent to live in a servant district, assigned to clean livestock pens or grind barley in silence. He will never see light again, but his punishment will shine brightly in the minds of all who witnessed it. Later, a junior scribe tells you that the blinding was once symbolicist, the threat carried out rarely. But during periods of famine, when tax cheating threatened temple stability, it became frighteningly common. A papyrus fragment recovered near Saqqara mentions 10 men blinded in a single week under Pharaoh Ahmose II. Historians argue whether it's accurate, but in this moment, you no longer care. That evening, as the sun sinks low and turns the limestone walls gold, you find yourself unable to focus. You clean an oil lamp 3 times. You forget the words to a prayer you've recited every day for a year. Egypt is full of stories about divine justice, but you now understand the truth. Human hands carry it out. And tomorrow, they'll carry it further still, because the next punishment doesn't involve scars or brands. It will be delivered with fire, not to flesh but to memory, a punishment that destroys not the body, but the reputation. The ultimate sentence for the worst crime. Making the gods look weak. You've learned to recognize the signs. Today, no one meets your eyes. Not the water fetchers, not the scribes, not even the temple cats, those lazy, knowing creatures who always seem one step ahead of fate. Everyone moves quietly, deliberately, like actors in a play they did not choose. And there's a reason. Because this morning's punishment doesn't spill blood, it spills honor. You arrive at the eastern gate to find a platform being constructed not out of stone or wood, but of papyrus scrolls, bundled and stacked in tiers like bricks. Most are blank. Some, you suspect, are not. A ceremonial torch sits nearby, wrapped in cloth soaked in oil. The symbolism is impossible to miss. This is the rarest, most irreversible punishment of all, the burning of the name. Only the most dangerous traitors receive this fate, those who corrupt public trust, offend the gods and the state, or twist sacred words into tools of chaos. These are the offenders Egypt does not merely erase. They are reversed. Today's condemned is a man once revered, a royal scribe who served on a commission to build a monument honoring the pharaoh's divine dreams. It was a prestigious task, sacred, but instead of recording the dreams as visions of divine prophecy, he reshaped them, twisting their meanings into self-serving predictions. He convinced lesser priests to follow him, claimed he, not Pharaoh, had been chosen to interpret the will of the gods. A dangerous man, the worst kind, eloquent. And so the gods and Pharaoh demand total revocation. The man is led to the scroll pyre, barefoot, his head shaved, his arms bound in front with red silkred, the color of Set, the god of disorder. He will not be lashed, not branded, not executed. Because when the scrolls burn, he will cease to exist. A priest steps forward with a clay tablet. It contains the man's name, his full lineage, his birth record, priestly certifications, and temple assignments. Everything that ever validated him. The priest reads it aloud, slowly, clearly, then drops the tablet to the ground and smashes it with his heel. Another priest opens a jar and lifts a small figurine of the condemned clay, roughly carved, etched with the glyphs of his name. You've seen this done during funerary rites, when symbolic enemies of the dead are broken so they can do no harm in the afterlife. But here, it's not symbolic. This figurine represents the condemned himself. The priest spits on it, breaks it in half, and casts the pieces into the scroll stack. Then the torch is lit. The fire climbs quickly, fueled by the dry reeds and oil-soaked cloth. The man stares at it, wide-eyed, lips moving in silent protest. But he says nothing. He can't. One of the earlier punishments took his tongue. As the flames rise, the crowd chants not words of mourning, but a ritual recantation, a kind of public denial of all he ever did. He was not born. He did not write. He did not serve. His name was wind. 3 times they chanted, over and over, until the scrolls blacken, curl, and collapse into glowing ash. By the end, there is no record left. The man is led away, not to prison, not to exile, but to nowhere. He will live out his days as a mute laborer in a temple quarry, denied burial, denied prayer, forbidden from even speaking his own name if he could. There is no afterlife for him. Even the gods will not find him. Scholars still debate whether this punishment actually destroyed records or merely declared them forbidden. But you just watched one burn. You saw a priest crush a lineage with his heel. You heard an entire crowd erase a man with a sentence. That's when you understand. In Egypt, reputation is eternal life. Destroy it, and you destroy the soul. Later that day, you overhear 2 novice scribes whispering. One asks if a man who's had his name burned can be forgiven. The other shrugs. How can the gods forgive someone they can no longer remember? The conversation stays with you. Even as night falls and the fire's ash drifts across the courtyard, coating statues and sandals alike, the silence remains. No one sings, no one drums, not because of grief, because everyone fears being next. But punishment in Egypt never stays in one form for long. It adapts, it transforms, it finds new vessels. And tomorrow, the condemned will not walk, will not speak, will not even stand, because the next punishment comes not by torch or staff. It comes from within the tomb, burial, in a living tomb, flooded with water, a ritual that turns a final resting place into a suffocating prison. The morning begins with the sound of rushing water, not the gentle murmur of irrigation canals, nor the calm lapping of the Nile. This water pounds a deep, echoing surge, unnatural and contained. You follow the sound through narrow temple halls, until it grows louder, wetter, heavier, until your sandals splash against cold stone and your breath catches from the dampness in the air. You're at the subterranean tomb vaults, deep beneath the temple of Osiris, a place built not for the living, nor even the honored dead, but for the condemned, the ones Egypt could not kill in daylight, the ones it preferred to drown in silence. Today, you are here to witness the sarcophagus drowning, ritual punishment, so rare, so symbolically precise, that most scribes pretend it belongs to myth. But it doesn't. You're standing in it. The chamber is lit by oil lamps floating in shallow clay bowls. The stone floor is slick. Moss crawls up the walls. A priest gestures for you to stay by the steps. What you see is not a tomb, not yet, but it will be. In the center of the room sits a massive sarcophagus, lid ajar, carved from black granite. Symbols of rebirth are scratched across its sides, but not cleanly. They've been defaced in specific places. Certain glyphs, life, eternity, ascentave, been intentionally broken. It is no longer a vessel for eternal rest. It is a trap. The condemned arrives moments later, carried by 4 guards. He does not struggle. His face is calm. Too calm. You learn later that he's been fed blue lotus tincture for hours, kept somewhere between dream and panic. He is accused of betraying the burial rites of a royal child, misplacing ritual amulets, omitting spells, rushing the process. Some say he did it for coin. Others, that he simply didn't care. Either way, his sentence has been written in water. The priests strip him of his linen wrappings, leaving only a thin ceremonial sash around his waist. Then they lift him into the sarcophagus. The slab interior is smooth, cold, and fitted with small channels carved into the base. A priest chants softly as he places a clay shabtai figure on the man's chest. Not a servant to guide him in the afterlife, a watcher to observe his final breaths. Then the water begins to pour, from 4 hidden pipes in the ceiling, possibly connected to the Nile itself, or to some temple reservoir. Thin streams of water begin to fill the coffin, slowly, deliberately, a symbolic washing, a ritual cleansing, a living burial. The man stirs as the water reaches his ribs, mumbles, but says nothing. A second priest sprinkles natron across the surface, speaking a curse. May your Ka find no light. May your Ba know no rest. You want to look away. You can't. The water climbs. This ritual is not meant to kill quickly. It is meant to simulate what Egypt fears most, not death, but unburied death. To be sealed away, body intact, soul unfree. Some say this punishment began during the reign of Sneferu, when pyramid construction became so fast, corners where cute and angry spirits made their way into royal dreams. A scapegoat was drowned in a sacred tomb, and the dream stopped. Whether it's true or not, the rite has remained buried, whispered, performed only by the high cults of Osiris and Anubis. By now, the man's mouth is underwater, his eyes roll, the watcher figurine floats beside his face. Then the lid is lowered, not slammed, lowered. The air within the chamber thickens as the stone seals shut. The water gurgles. A faint knock echoes from inside. Then silence. No one moves. The priests bow. A small inscription is carved into the sarcophagus lid, a single glyph meaning between. He is no longer living, not yet fully dead, just between. The sarcophagus will be left sealed for 3 days. On the 4th, the tomb will be opened. If the body has decayed, the ritual is considered successful. If not, the priests will add more natron, more water, and reseal it for 7 more days. Some say this isn't punishment at all, that it's containment, a way of locking away souls who could do more harm in the afterlife than in life, that the gods themselves demand certain people be drowned in stone. Historians still argue, was this real, or just a cautionary tale told to apprentices to keep their hands steady during burials? You no longer care. You saw it. You heard it. And when the final sound faded, a chill passed through your bones that no desert sun could warm. As you climb the stairs back into daylight, you emerge blinking, shaking, unsure of your footing. But the world outside has not changed. Papyrus sellers haggle in the square. Fishermen clean their nets. Temple boys sweep leaves from courtyards. Only you know that beneath their feet, a man is drowning in the dark. That night, you try to sleep, but you dream of stone lids and slow floods, of water creeping across your chest, of watchers who do not blink. And you remember what a priest once whispered as you passed him near a colonnade. The gods do not forget. They do not forgive. They only weigh. Tomorrow's punishment? Something simpler. A man, a pyramid, a stone block, and a missing hand. The day begins under the looming shadow of the unfinished pyramid. Its upper tiers remain jagged, like a staircase to nowhere. Workers swarm across its flanks like ants on hot stone, and everywhere, the sound of chisels, pulleys, and grunts fills the air. You've never been this close to one before, only seen it from a distance, watching the sky split around its peak like a spear piercing the clouds. Today, you're not here to build. You're here to witness a punishment as old as stone itself, the pyramid labor reprisal. It's not the most dramatic name, but it doesn't need to be. In Egypt, pyramid construction was sacred. Every brick laid, every inch carved, was a gesture toward eternity. To sabotage such a thing wasn't just a crime against pharaohship, was a blasphemy against time. against the gods who ruled it. The condemned today is a stonecutter named Rekhmet, a worker from the eastern quarry. Young, broad-shouldered, hands calloused from years of carving. He was caught chiseling corners off a precision block meant for a royal burial chamber, shaving weight to reduce his labor. He said nothing when accused, but they found the tool marks. That was enough. The punishment isn't a whipping, it isn't branding, it's something far older. They bring him forward at midday, when the stone is hottest and the shadows are shortest. He doesn't resist. Maybe he already knows what's coming. Maybe he's heard the stories. A foreman calls out. 2 guards step forward, holding a chisel and a wooden mallet. Rekhmet's left hand, the dominant one, used for carving, hauling, Hammeringis placed flat on the edge of a cutting block. His fingers twitch. A scribe reads the decree aloud. He took from the pyramid. Now the pyramid takes from him. The mallet falls once. A crack. Then a scream. His fingers are gone. Not all of them. Just enough to ruin his grip. A mercy. By Egyptian standards. But they're not done. He is ordered to carry the same stone he sabotaged. Not to its final resting place. Not to be laid in a wall, but to a ditch near the quarry path, where broken or rejected blocks are discarded. His task is simple. Drag it, one-handed, across the sand. The weight of it gouges into his palm. He stumbles, he screams again, but he drags it, all the way. When he finally collapses beside the trench, the guards nod. He's allowed to crawl away. He will live. But he will never work again. And that, you understand, is the point. The punishment is not execution. It's exile from usefulness. To take a hand from a builder is to make him obsolete. And in Egypt, being useless is its own kind of death. There are fragments of old quarry ledgers from Saqqara that describe this ritual in brief detail, always with the same phrase, the hand for the stone. Some scholars interpret it metaphorically, but you saw it. And later, you see him too. Rekhmet sits by the canal, his mutilated hand wrapped in palm fibers, eyes blank. Children avoid him. Workers pass without a word. Even the cats give him distance. You look away, but as always in Egypt, there's no time to breathe. That same afternoon, you're summoned to the Temple of Anubis for what they call the Final Judgment Preview. You've never heard of it. And that's precisely the point. The condemned is not accused of theft, nor blasphemy, nor treason. He's accused of being impure in spirit. A vague term, intentionally so. The priesthood can use it for anything. Suspicion, dissent, disloyalty, even minor ritual errors committed too many times. He has not died, but he is about to be prepared as if he had. In the courtyard of the temple stands a scale identical in design to the mythical one in the Hall of Two Truths. Beside it, a replica of Ammit, the devourer, lion, crocodile, hippo, clay-molded, life-sized, painted with terrifying care. The man is brought forward. He wears white, not a robe, a shroud. Priests lead him around the courtyard, reading from the Book of the Dead, not as guidance for the soul, but as accusation. You have lied. You have mocked Ma'at. You have stolen the breath of purity. He is made to confess, line by line, the things he did not do as if he were already dead. This is a psychological punishment, a living mockery of the afterlife. Then comes the worst part. They weigh his heart, not literally, symbolically. A small clay jar, said to represent his the emotional hearties, placed on one side of the scale, a feather on the other. The scale tips. Of course it does. It always does. It's weighted. It's a ritual, not a test. The priest declares the man's soul unworthy of eternity. And from that moment on, he will be treated as if he is already dead. His name will not be spoken. He cannot enter temples. He cannot be buried in sacred soil. His food is brought to him in black jars. His bed lies outside the city walls. No one can greet him. No one may mourn him when he actually dies. His soul, it is said, now wanders outside time. You see him later, sitting near the reed marshes, alone, as mosquitoes buzz and frogs croak. He says nothing. He is not supposed to exist. And now, you understand why the priests call this the final judgment preview. Because in Egypt, sometimes they don't wait for death to declare your afterlife. Sometimes, they revoke it in advance. And as you walk back to your quarters, the sun setting behind the half-built pyramid, you remember the words a stonemason once muttered to you over lunch. They say the gods weigh your heart when you die. But here? They weigh it every single day. The morning begins, not with a scream, nor a drum, but with silency and absence so absolute it presses against your chest. Even the birds seem to hush. The temple corridors are nearly empty. You can feel it in the air. Something taboo is about to unfold. Not just forbidden, but quietly, personally horrifying. You are summoned not to the main courtyard, nor the public halls, but to a narrow chamber behind the scribe's archives, rarely used, hidden in shadow. Here, the punishment is not for the body, nor the soul. It is for the voice. The condemned is already kneeling on a reed mat, flanked by 2 record keepers. She is a market vendor, or rather, wassawoman, accused of something particularly dangerous in a city built on ritual and reputation, spreading malicious gossip about a temple priest. She didn't steal anything. She didn't even lie. But she spoke aloud about something sacred. And in Egypt, certain words, once said, cannot be unsaid. So they will take her mouth from her. This punishment is known as sewing the lips of gossipers. You've never seen it before. You thought it was a children's tale, something whispered to scare girls into silence during festivals. But no, this is real and chillingly precise. The priest beside you carries no whip, no blade. Only a reed needle, thin as a hair, and a thread made of dyed papyrus fiber, soaked in frankincense and natron. The woman is calm, resigned. Perhaps she thought this would never happen. Perhaps she thought it was still a joke until this moment. She is made to rinse her mouth with bitter, water-symbolic purification. Then the priest begins. He threads the needle through just the outer layers of skin, looping it through the center of both lips in 4 tight passes. Not enough to cause blood. Enough to keep her mouth shut, tightly. The result isn't permanent. It's not supposed to be. After 2 or 3 days, the stitches will dissolve or be removed. But for now, she is forbidden to speak. If she tries, pain. If she eats, only liquid, by straw. And her name will be added to a list maintained in the temple's Hall of Discipline. Those who let words become fire. You can't look away. The act is surgical, efficient. The priest does not leer. He does not shame. He works as if binding a scroll, as if restoring balance. But even after it's done, there's more. A final touch. A scarab seal is stamped on her wrist in ink temporary, but visible for weeks. It bears the glyph for seker, or whisperer, not liar, not slanderer, just someone who spoke what shouldn't be spoken. That, you realize, is the real weight of this punishment. Not the thread, but the mark, the social exile that follows. Markets will stop trusting her. Midwives will refuse her offerings. Neighbors will stare when she tries to smile through sore lips. She won't be arrested again. She won't need to be. Egypt knows how to make silence last. You leave the chamber in a daze, heart heavy with unspoken things. But as you turn a corner, you nearly stumble into a procession. Not a holy one, a mockery. A crowd is gathering, laughing, jeering, surrounding a man wrapped not in linen, but in donkey skin. Your stomach turns. You thought that punishment had already happened days ago, in the eastern tomb pits, But this is something new, or worse, something more public. The priests lead him through the streets. He stumbles, humiliated, forced to carry a sign made of palm board strung around his neck. It reads, "He sang false hymns." Another blasphemer. A singer accused of altering sacred melodies during a lunar rite, whether by accident or defiance, no one seems to know. But here he is, made to walk barefoot across hot stones, followed by boys with tambourines, mocking his tune. They call this the procession of the donkey cloak. It's rare, deliberately humiliating, and no one intervenes. Once, in a fragmentary scroll found near Abydos, a priest wrote of a similar ritual. Let the skin of the stubborn beast wrap the one whose voice wandered. Scholars debate whether it was poetic or literal. Today, you know the answer. As the man is paraded past the temple gates, his cloak stinking, his eyes hollow, a priest steps forward and dabs black paint across his forehead. A final touch, a glyph meaning crooked, not evil, not cursed, just bent, imperfect. The message is clear. This man cannot carry the voice of the gods. He mimicked the sacred. Now he mimics a beast. They lead him away, somewhere beyond the city, to an abandoned storeroom where he will live in silence, wrapped in shame, away from the music he once corrupted. By the end of the day, 2 voices are gone, one sealed, one stained. And as the sun sets behind the colossi near the river, you wonder, how many more ways can Egypt invent to strip someone of their identity? But you know the answer already. As long as there are names, roles, and rituals, there will be new punishments for violating them. And tomorrow? Tomorrow will bring something truly strange. A punishment not given by priests, but by dancers. And their only weapon? Music. The day begins with laughter, not the warm, innocent kind, but the sharp-edged cackle of ritual performers already deep into their roles. You hear bells jingling, tambourines clashing, and above it all, the high, lilting note of a flute. For a moment, it almost feels like a festival, until you spot the prisoner. Wrapped in linen stained by sweat and dirt, barefoot, his eyes darting nervously as the dancers encircle him in a slow, tightening loop. He has not been chained. He's been costumed. This is no ordinary punishment. This is execution by ceremonial dance, an archaic sentence so rare it hasn't been seen in the city in over a decade. And yet here it is again, carried out on a raised dais behind the temple of Hathor, goddess of music and love, but also vengeance and madness. The condemned was once a ritual drummer, perhaps too clever for his own good. He's accused of altering a sacred tempo during the Feast of the Sky Cow, a seemingly minor offense. But in Egypt, rhythm is not just entertainment. It is a divine pattern. To disrupt it is to pull at the threads of order. And so, the punishment is not meant to be bloody, but it is cruel. The dancers, dressed in shining white robes laced with copper bells, begin their performance. The drums beat slow and steady, but grow faster with each circuit. The man must keep up not by dancing with them, but by mirroring their steps in reverse. If he falters, if he stumbles, if he lags behind the pace, they strike him, not with whips, with instruments. The thin edge of a harp frame across the shins, the rounded base of a flute to the ribs, the snap of a lute string against the neck. It is deeply symbolic. The instruments of his former trade are now used against him. And the crowd eyes, there is a crowd claps in rhythm, not to cheer him on, but to mark his failures. Each time he missteps, they raise their hands in sync, not a jeer, a ritual acknowledgement, a liturgical shaming. It lasts for nearly an hour. The sweat beads on his brow. His knees begin to tremble. One dancer intentionally shifts the pattern. He misses the change. The penalty? He must perform a solo. a public recreation of the exact step he corrupted during the original ceremony. But now, it's done in silence. No music, just the shuffle of his feet, the rising laughter of the dancers, and the watching eyes of priests recording his every move. When it ends, he is not beaten, he is not imprisoned. Instead, his Druma beautiful frame instrument, inlaid with colored shellas, broken in front of him, and the skin is buried in a shallow pit beneath the temple steps. A symbolic unmaking of his role. He will never perform again. Not in this life. Not for the gods. Later, as you carry incense back to the storehouses, you ask a senior acolyte if this ritual is ever used for crimes beyond music. He nods. Once, long ago, a dancer defiled a fertility rite and was made to dance until her legs collapsed beneath her. Another story tells of a singer sentenced to chant without pause for a full day until her voice tore and she bled from the throat. Some historians claim these are exaggerations, ancient propaganda, but you now understand that exaggeration is part of the punishment. It makes others fearful, careful, devout. The rest of the day passes in slow dread. You expect to be sent home. You are not. Instead, you're instructed to deliver oil lamps to a strange little room behind the Temple of Set. You don't ask why. You never do anymore. The door opens to reveal a clay pit, circular and lined with donkey skins, their stench sharp and acrid in the warm air. You know immediately what this is. The cursed burial in donkey skins. The condemned is already lying in the center, arms bound, eyes wide. He is silent. He knows. This punishment is not for thieves or liars or heretics. It's for the disgraced those who have so thoroughly dishonored their lineage, their office, or their contract with the state that no other sentence will do. The man was once a tax collector. Rumors say he embezzled grain during a famine. Not much. Just enough that 2 children starved. Whether that's true, no one cares now. He is not buried in earth. He is buried in shame. First, the donkey skins are stitched loosely around his legs and torso. Then the pit is filled not all the way, just up to the chest with a mix of sand and clay, pressed down to make movement impossible. A priest recites a purification cursinat to cleanse the man, but to purify the land from his memory. He is not expected to survive long. The heat will kill him, or the dehydration, or the silence. The donkey skins serve 2 purposes. Symbolically, they mark him as a beast. Donkeys are stubborn, lowly, unclean by temple standards. But practically, they absorb sweat and stink, trapping heat, hastening his end. He cannot even be mourned. Those who try to speak his name will be fined. His children, if any, will be assigned new names, their bloodline declared impure for 3 generations. You do not stay to watch him die. You don't have to. The next morning, his pit will be sealed with limestone dust, and the surface will be smoothed as if nothing ever happened. And yet you'll remember the music, the silence, the press of cloth, the stink of skins. Egypt has countless ways to punish. But this one lingers, because it tells you something terrifying. You can be erased while still alive. And tomorrow, you'll see what happens when the condemned is allowed to speak one last time only, to say goodbye to their own breath. You awaken before the first light breaks over the desert horizon, and already the air feels thick, weighted not with heat, but with anticipation. There's a chill in your chest that no blanket could warm. Today, something unusual is happening. Not the brutality of a whip or the spectacle of public shame, but a punishment both intimate and irreversible. You're told to head toward the outer edge of the necropolis, just past the lotus fields, where the wind carries fewer sounds and fewer secrets. The guards say nothing, but their pace is slower than usual. No rush. Just a quiet escort. The ritual you're about to witness is rare, reserved for the truly defiant, the ones who accepted guilt but refused silence. This is the final breath confession, a ritualized execution in which the condemned is permitted to speak only once, and only to describe their guilt aloud before their voice is taken along with their air. The man sitting on the limestone bench in the center of the arena-like courtyard is old, not elderly, just worn, like an old chisel whose edge is dulled from decades of use. He's a former priest, once beloved, until his downfall. He was caught teaching foreign chants to temple novicians from Canaan or Nubia, depending on who you ask. To some, a harmless curiosity. To others, treason. Cross-cultural liturgy is strictly forbidden. Pharaoh is the son of our gods, not theirs. But instead of hiding or denying, the priest confessed. Not once, but many times, and publicly. He argued that truth belongs to more than one tongue, that the gods don't fear comparison, that the river of worship has more than one bank. His words were beautiful, dangerous, and unforgettable. So Egypt will now force him to forget them in front of witnesses. He is calm, dressed in plain linen, clean, his hair is oiled. A priest of Set steps forward, not the high one, but a lesser functionary, and presents a clay amulet shaped like a stylized windpipe. The condemned is asked to hold it in his left hand, close to his throat, as a symbol. Then the guard ties a narrow linen sash around his neck, knotted behind the ears, and trailing down the back like a ribbon. Then the priest speaks. You may say one thing, not two, not a chant, not a name, one sentence. Your last breath will carry it. The old man lifts his head, eyes steady, and speaks. His voice cracks slightly, but the words are clear. The gods are not jealous, only men are. A silence settles that no bird dares break. Then, with no further ceremony, the sash is pulled tight methodically, slowly, by a pair of guards who do not flinch. His chest rises once, again, then stops. The amulet slips from his fingers and shatters against the stone. The body will be placed, not in a tomb, but in a silent chamber beneath the archives, where no hymns are sung and no incense is burned. A place for those whose words once carried too far. You stay long after the others leave. Something in the man's voice lingers in your ears. Not the content, perhaps, but the audacity. He knew what he was doing. He used his last breath to place blame where no one else dared. And now, Egypt pretends his breath was never taken, only that it escaped. Later that day, you're called to clean the steps leading to the Temple of Thoth, a trivial task, until you notice another punishment being prepared. This time, not for blasphemy, but for insubordination. A temple scribia girl, no older than 15, refused to transcribe a list of corrupted harvest records. She knew the numbers were false, and she wouldn't write them. She was warned. She was told it was just clerical adjustment. She refused again, and so she will be punished, not with silence, but with ink. The scribes call this punishment the ink veil. First, the offender is tied to a wooden post in the scriptory courtyard. Then, using brushes dipped in thick black dye, 2 senior scribes paint glyphs across her skinot words of sin, not curses, but meaningless gibberish. Nonsense symbols, loops, fragments, unfinished strokes, a corruption of language, a parody of the sacred. They begin on her shoulders, then down her arms, her legs, her cheeks. The message is brutal. If she won't write lies, they will turn her into one. The ink won't wash off easily. It's not regular scribes' inkets, mixed with gum resin and ochre, designed to stain for weeks. For that entire time, she will not be allowed into temples. She may not even walk on the same side of the road as a priest. Children will mock her. The scribes she once worked beside will treat her like a page that's been blotted and ruined. But the punishment is not permanent. After 30 days, she may return, if she agrees to rewrite the record. You watch her shake her head as they finish the final mark on her back. She would rather wear gibberish than compose lies. No one claps. No one cheers. Even the scribes applying the ink seem uncomfortable, perhaps realizing that, by turning her body into a scroll of nonsense, they've acknowledged she was right to begin with. That night, in your quarters, you find yourself unable to sleep. You replay the words of the old priest, the girl's painted skin, the silent gasps of the crowd. You begin to wonder if these punishments show ever symbolic, however elegantare, not about restoring balance at all, but about maintaining control over those who speak, who write, who question. Tomorrow, they say, there will be another punishment, this time involving a mirror. And those are the worst ones. Because in Egypt, punishment doesn't always strike the body. Sometimes it just shows you who you are and refuses to look away. The next morning begins with an odd sense of symmetry. The sun hangs directly above the eastern horizon, the wind flows inland from the river, and the temple gongs sound not with urgency, but with eerie precision. Everything feels aligned, except for you. You're summoned to a courtyard enclosed on all sides by polished stone, where the walls are not decorated with scenes of gods or heroes, but with reflections bronze mirrors, dozens of them, arranged in a great elliptical curve so that the person in the center sees not one image, but hundreds. This is no temple. It's a punishment arena. And today, the sentence is, the Hall of Self-Sita. Punishment less known than the lash or branding, but in many ways far more difficult to endure, not for what it does to the body, but for what it forces the mind to confront. The condemned is a noble's son young, well-fed, freshly shaved, and terrified. His crime is not theft, nor heresy, but vanity of the highest order. He desecrated a temple statue not to mock the gods, but to improve its appearance. He had the lips of the goddess Hathor reshaped to look more like his lover's, a sculptor's chisel, a quiet bribe, a whisper of, she'd be prettier this way. And suddenly the divine had been edited. The priests were furious, but they did not whip him. Instead, they prepared the San ordeal of reflection. In the center of the courtyard stands a low stool. He is made to kneel upon it, arms bound behind his back, facing outward toward the sea of bronze mirrors. The sun is positioned precisely to catch each reflective surface and bounce its light into his eyes. But these are not perfect mirrors. They're old, dented, smoky. Some warp the image, others split it. No two reflections are identical. He sees his face as it is, and as it might be, as it was, as it could become. Then the ritual begins. One by one, the priests speak aloud his transgressions, not just what he did, but what he thought. They've interviewed servants, scribes, slaves. They know his jealousies, his flirtations, his vanity, his quiet wish to be loved more than feared. Each statement is like a hammer blow, and he has to watch every twitch of his face in response. He cannot close his eyes. If he does, they will apply coal mixed with vinegar, which burns. So he stares, blinking into his own fractured gaze. This continues for hours. There are breaks only to drink water served from a reflective bowl. When the sun moves too far, the priests reposition the mirrors to catch the new angle. By midday, his breathing is ragged. He has not been struck. But he is unraveling, because the punishment is not in the mirrors themselves. It is in the public dismantling of his illusion piece by piece, ego by ego, until what remains is someone unrecognizable even to himself. You overhear a scribe say this punishment originated in Memphis, during a period when Pharaoh's court was overrun with gossip and appearance politics. The high priest devised it not for physical crimes, but for spiritual corruption, the kind that wears perfume and jewels, not chains. Some scholars claim it was purely metaphorical, used in temple poems, but today proves otherwise. At the end of the ritual, the youth is released, but not before each mirror is turned inward, toward him, forming a circle. He is left there for 1 full hour, with only himself for company. When he finally emerges, his face is streaked with tears, and he no longer looks straight at anyone. He has been stripped of what made him dangerous, not power, but certainty. That night, no one mocks him. No one calls out. His punishment has done its job. He is now a man forever haunted by versions of himself. You think that might be the end of your day, but the high priest appears again and gestures for you to follow. You're led into the depths of the temple complex, past the embalming rooms, into a space you didn't even know existed, a domed chamber carved from a single block of limestone, lined with black resin. It is utterly quiet. No torches, no sound, just the faint scent of dried flowers and old parchment. There, you see another condemned figure, but not tied, not bound, not beaten. She sits cross-legged on the floor, calm, serene, surrounded by dozens of wax tablets. Each one bears a story, her story. She was a royal scribe who, for reasons unknown, began rewriting official history scrolls to depict past pharaohs as flawed, human, even weak. Her edits were discovered only because one of her altered scrolls made its way into a noble's library. She was caught. She admitted everything, but not with shame, with purpose. Truth, she said, is a kindness, even to kings. So now, her punishment is called the whisper of erasure. She is to sit in this chamber and listen as priests read back every false word she ever wrote. Not aloud, just a whisper. Over and over. A soft muttering like insects crawling through the dark. No eye contact, no tone, just repetition, correction, nullification. She is not allowed to speak, not allowed to move. She simply sits and absorbs the rewriting of her rewriting. It is, in every sense, a reverse authorship, a peeling away of her legacy. Some say this punishment lasts a week. Others, that it continues until she forgets what she originally wrote, until the stories she invented are replaced by the ones she denied. You don't know what to make of it. It's not pain, not exile, not even shame. It is slow deletion, and as you leave the dark chamber, heart heavy and mind clouded, you realize, in Egypt, punishment doesn't always break bones. Sometimes, it unthreads the self like a scroll, unrolling backwards, until there's nothing left but silence and dust. Tomorrow, they say, you'll witness the final burial rites of one who has no tomb, because sometimes, punishment doesn't just destroy the body or the mind. It damns the afterlife itself. Before dawn even touches the sandstone walls, you're summoned once again. But this time, with no explanation, no preparation, only the brief command. Go to the Wadi Gate. You know the place. A narrow, wind-scoured ravine beyond the necropolis, where the dead are usually carted through on their final journey to the west. But today, there is no procession, no chants, no mourners, just a lone figure, sitting cross-legged in the sand, wrapped not in linen, but in coarse flax. And beside him, a single object, an empty sarcophagus, still unpainted, its lid propped open like a silent mouth waiting to swallow. This is not a funeral. It is the burial without Nemea. Sentence reserved for the most extreme transgressors. Not the violent, not the defiant, but those whose presence, even in death, cannot be allowed to echo. It is Egypt's cruelest form of deletion, not of the body, but of the soul's trajectory itself. The man's crime? No one speaks it aloud. Some say he altered sacred census records to erase entire families. Others claim he collaborated with foreign raiders, bartering tomb maps for silver. The truth is tangled, vague, and no one wants to be the one who says it clearly. That, you realize, is part of the punishment. Social cowardice becomes a veil. No one wants to remember, so no one truly knows. There are no inscriptions on the coffin, no eyes of Horus, no spells, no amulets. The priests do not anoint the body. He is made to walk into the stone box alive, stepping in without resistance. It's his sentence, and he has accepted it. Before the lid is sealed, a priest announces not to him, but to the heir. This man is not of Egypt. It is not exile. It is obliteration, worse than death, worse than damnation. A soul without name cannot be judged. It floats, alone. Historians argue whether these kinds of burials were symbolic or real. Ostracism is well documented. Erasure of names from monuments commonplace. But to entomb a man alive, without the rites that guide a soul through the duat. Many scholars call it hyperbole. You, however, just watched it happen. The lid closes with a dull scrape. No nails, no locks, just silence. And yet, it is not over. As the priests prepare to leave, one remains behind. An older man with deep-set eyes and no visible badge of rank. He lifts a jar of pitch and begins to pour it into the engraved lines meant for hieroglyphs. Not a drop spills. The lines remain empty, but now darkened. Symbolically cursed. The stone is then lowered into a sand pit, not carved out like a tomb, but shaped more like a hole meant to hide shame. A few scattered stones are thrown atop it, not by officials, but by attendants, as if burying a pile of rags. And with that, he is gone. No markers, no laments, no afterlife. And as you stand there watching the pit fade into the landscape, something inside you flinches not out of fear for him, but for yourself. Because now you know this isn't the worst punishment in Egypt. The worst is what comes next. You return to the temple at dusk and find a strange scene unfolding in the scriptorium, a place where punishments are usually recorded, not performed. A boy, no older than 12, is standing in front of a carved slab, holding a writing reed. His hands are shaking. His teacher stands beside him, silent. The boy has been accused of forging his literacy test, results a minor offense by any civil standard, but grave within the house of life. Here, the written word is divine. To fake one's ability to write is to mock the gods directly. And so, his punishment is a bizarre ritual called the echo without ink. He must copy a scroll, aloud word for word, glyph by glyph, without writing it down. The entire thing. Any error, hesitation, or omission will reset the ritual from the beginning. No aid, no help, just memory, breath, and the grinding weight of performance. He starts. At first, he's confident, clear. But after a dozen lines, his voice quivers. A single mispronunciation, and the priest intones, "Begin again." His eyes widen. His throat is dry. He begins again. The point isn't humiliation, it's internalization. The temple believes that if he cannot carry the sacred words in his flesh, he cannot be trusted to inscribe them into stone. This punishment might take hours, days. Some stories say a boy once took 9 before he was allowed to sleep. You step back, disturbed. The cruelty lies not in violence, but in the refusal to let forgetfulness exist. You return to your quarters late. The image of the sealed coffin in the wadi haunts you, but so does the sound of the boy's cracking voice, repeating sacred lines into the evening. And now, it becomes clear, punishment in Egypt is not always about suffering. Often, it is about preservation of power, ritual dominance, and the enforcement of perfect memory. To forget is to be dangerous. To deviate is to be foreign. To stand apart is to be erased. Tomorrow, they say, you'll be sent to the workshop of the mortuary artisans. Not to carve, not to build, but to watch what happens when the image of a man is carved out of the world. You arrive at the workshop before the first rooster cries. The sky is still a bluish bruise overhead, and the stones beneath your sandals are slick with morning dew. At the threshold of the artisan's hall, the scent of resin and wet clay curls through the air, unusually bitter. You recognize the placets where funerary statues are made. Alabaster visages of scribes, pharaohs, warriors, even minor bureaucrats, all carved to perfection, so their souls can recognize themselves in the afterlife. But today, something is very wrong. The tools are all here, the statues too. But someone has begun. Removing the faces. One by one, chisel strikes are taken to each statue's head, not to destroy the stone entirely, but to erase the identity. Eyes scraped away, mouths dulled smooth, ears shaved into ghostly nubs. You stand in silence as a master artisan, usually so meticulous and proud, performs this work like a man possessed. His hands shake slightly. This is not a task of creation. It's one of negation. You quickly learn that this is the punishment called image erasure. And it's not applied to people at least not directly. It's applied to the representations of the condemned. The person in question is already dead. A former official, once celebrated, now uncovered as a traitor to the grain registry, he sold off supplies during the flooding season while pretending to give charity to the poor. His statues were already finished, lined up neatly to be shipped to his family's tomb. But now, the decree has been passed. Every image of him must be struck from history. Not just his name, not just the scrolls, but the physical shape of him too. You're told to help carry the defaced busts to the temple kiln. Not for destruction, they are not to be shattered. Number. They are to be fired again, hardened into faceless stone, then reburied upside down beneath common worker barracks. Their purpose is to endure in obscurity. This is worse than oblivion. This is unbeing. Historians still argue whether this practice had theological implications or was purely political. Some say erasing the image prevents the soul from being recognized by the gods in the afterlife. Others say it's symbolic revenge, denying the dead the honor of being remembered. Either way, the effect is chilling. As you help lay the blank statues into the fire, one slips from your hand. It cracks slightly, just a hairline fracture through the shoulder. The artisan shoots you a look, but says nothing. Even damaged, these will serve their sentence. Their silence is part of the punishment. By noon, the work is done. Dozens of once proud effigies now look like lumps of stone, awaiting a burial that will carry no prayers, no incense, no tears. You think with a jolt that this is the physical embodiment of a curse, not to the body, but to memory. Worse still, you begin to wonder. How many of the anonymous statues you've seen in courtyards or tomb debris weren't accidents of erosion, but deliberate acts of erasure? Back at the temple, the high priest is waiting. He motions for you to follow. You're tired. You want to refuse, but you don't. You're led not to a shrine, but to a river jetty, where a flat-bottomed skiff sits bobbing against the reeds. On board is a man chained at the wrists, silent, older than the river mud itself. He is pale from time in a cell, dressed in plain linen, no adornment. Around his neck hangs a single amulet, a jackal's head, the symbol of Anubis, and beside him sits a sealed clay jar. You already know what this is. The ritual of displaced heart. It is the final punishment in cases where guilt is so severe, so complete, that even death does not finish the sentence. The man is said to have poisoned a sacred well, killing not just people, but livestock, and polluting a purification site used for coronation rites. He is not being executed, he already was, days ago. What you're witnessing now is what happens after death, when even the afterlife is revoked. The priest explains that this man's heart was removed post-mortem, not to be preserved, not to be weighed, but to be displaced. The jar beside him contains the organ, sealed with pitch and resin. It is not to be stored in a canopic box, nor buried with the body. Instead, the skiff will drift halfway across the river, where the jar will be cast into the water, not the Nile, but a smaller tributary, known for being too shallow to fish, too muddy to farm. A useless place. A forgotten artery. The body, meanwhile, will be buried on the eastern bank, where the sun resents a reversal of tradition. No one is buried there. It is reserved for foreigners, or in this case, those denied the sun's descent into night. As the skiff drifts out, a priest chants not a hymn, but a declaration. He is undone. His center floats away. His truth will never know balance. You watch as the jar is dropped into the current. It vanishes with a soft splash. A flock of ibis takes flight. The man's body is left behind on a litter, ready for burial in ground that will not bless him. This is how Egypt ensures justice extends past breath. Not only is the body denied union with its heart, but the soul is denied ma'at balance, justice, the very foundation of eternal peace. As you walk back, exhausted, the sun begins to sink. You pass a shrine with an unfinished mural. In it, the gods stand in judgment. A man kneels before them, eyes closed, arms open, but you notice the painter has left the man's face blank. You pose, and for a moment you understand. Punishment here is not always about vengeance or order. Sometimes it is about preventing the condemned from ever completing their story. Tomorrow, they say, you'll witness one final ordeal. And it won't involve fire, or stone, or water, just a single word that can never be spoken again. It is your final morning at the temple. You wake not to the usual call of the conch or the low chant of acolytes, but to absolute quiet so complete, it rings in your ears like pressure beneath the surface of deep water. There are no birds, no footsteps. Even the sand outside your quarters lies undisturbed. You are summoned by a single boy, no older than 10, holding a folded piece of linen inscribed with only 3 glyphs: name, gone, soon. You follow him. He leads you not to the great courtyards, nor the execution pits, nor the house of silence. You are taken instead to a small chamber beneath the northern archives, a room you didn't know existed. The walls are lined not with scriptures or statues, but with empty recesses, places where something once sat or someone once knelt. The room smells like old parchment and dried milkweed, and in its center stands a figure, tall, veiled, utterly still. She is the condemned, and today she is to receive the erasure of name, the most final punishment in ancient Egypt, the one reserved for those who have done something so complex, so politically dangerous, that no single crime can define it. Historians still debate what she did. Some say she impersonated a deity during an eclipse, tricking citizens into donating land to her fake temple. Others claim she was born from a rival dynasty, smuggled into the capital as a baby, then quietly began influencing court decisions from behind the curtain of a false identity. But none of that matters now, because this punishment is not about what she did. It's about making sure no one remembers she ever did it. The priests stand in a semicircle, silent. One holds a scroll made of tightly rolled reed, bound in sinew. It is unsealed, but never read. Instead, it is handed to her. She must tear it herself. She does so with steady fingers, one strip at a time, dropping each piece into a shallow clay brazier where a single charcoal ember glows. She does not flinch. You do. Each scrap of papyrus vanishes with a soft hiss. Her story is disappearing. Then comes the part that truly unsettles you. She is asked to speak her own name aloud, once, and then never again. She lowers her veil, revealing a face that is neither young nor old, neither beautiful nor plain, just human. She closes her eyes and says her name. You hear it, and then the priest, with a small shard of blackened bone, scratches it into the soft plaster of the wallenly to immediately plaster over it with clay, whitewash it with gypsum, and press a reed mat over the spot to smooth it down. No spell, no chisel, just obliteration. Her name is now gone. From this moment forward, no one is permitted to write it. No one will speak it. It is not to be recorded in temple logs, nor whispered in oral tradition. Her likeness will not be drawn. Her deeds, whether glorious or monstrous, are now the province of nothing. In Egypt, to lose your name is to lose eternity. This is the final death. Even in the duat, where the soul journeys through challenges and gates, the first question asked is, "Who are you?" She will have no answer. The punishment ends without violence. She is not struck. She is not bound. She is simply led to a small chamber in the rear wall and told to sit. There, she will live out her days in perfect anonymity. No one may visit her. No one may speak to her directly. She is to exist, like wind against stone felt, but never remembered. As you turn to leave, one of the priests touches your shoulder. He looks you in the eye and says, "This is how a kingdom protects itself. Not with spears, with silence." Outside, the world is as it was. The sun glows, the palms sway. Children laugh in the distance, unaware of what has just been unmade. You walk home slowly, thinking of the punishments you've seen. The sewn lips, the inked limbs, the shattered statues, the shattered hearts. You recall the one who danced until collapse, the one whose breath spoke rebellion, the one whose coffin bore no name. You remember them all, and you realize something strange. You remember, which means they are not truly gone. And perhaps, despite Egypt's efforts, nothing ever is. Even punishment fades. Even silence cracks. Even the most feared fate, the erasure of a name, can't fully hold if someone, somewhere, recalls the weight of it. And now, you carry that weight. But before you close your eyes, let it all settle. Let the voices quiet. Let the heat of the day slip from your bones. No more faces to watch. No more names to erase. Just you, and a world turning slowly under the stars. The sand is still now. The fires have burned low. You lie back, perhaps still feeling the echoes of the day, of the many days, their weight tucked behind your eyes like shadows. But it's all right. Let it drift. Let each punishment, each face, each voice fall like papyrus, scraps into a breeze you no longer need to follow. The Nile flows on without them. So can you. The air is soft tonight. The same wind that once carried chants through temple halls now brushes your cheek with gentleness. No judgment, no names. Just a rhythm older than kings and kinder than law. Breathe into it. Deeper, slower. Let the sound of distant reeds sway through your thoughts, calming every crease of your brow, softening the spaces behind your ribs. You've walked far in this land through silence, through ritual, through pain that wasn't yours but somehow left a trace. You can let that go now. The stones no longer need your feet. The scrolls no longer need your hands. You've heard the stories. You've borne witness. That is enough. So close your eyes if you haven't already. There is nothing left to remember tonight. Just warm sand beneath your spine, starlight overhead, and the hush of ancient gods watching not with judgment, but with calm. Rest. You're safe now. And the past can wait until morning. Sweet dreams.